Hello. Welcome to the West of England Nature Partnership Conference 2024. I'm Ian Barrett. I'm the chair of the partnership and the chief executive of Avon Wildlife Trust. It's fantastic to see so many people here. Every time we do one of these WENP conferences, it's bigger and higher production values than it's ever been before. So it's fantastic that so many people are so excited about what we're doing and interested to see what's going on. And you are the lucky 200 or so who've managed to get the tickets, because there's been even more interest and lots of people wanting to be here. So welcome. It's been a long journey with WENP, set up in 2012 to get to where we are today. So there's a lot of people here who've been a really key part of that going through. Many of the founding partners that set WENP up in 2012 are still very much here and involved today. So Bevis Watts, who is going to be speaking. Bevis, can you give everyone a wave? Was the one of the founding chairs of West of England Nature Partnership. And we got Dominic Hogg here somewhere, who is also, is Dom here? Where's Dom? Over there. So, and many of the people who were involved right from the outset are around them. So put your hand up if you were involved at the start of WENP, right at the beginning in 2012. So, yeah, so that continuity has been really important to what we're doing. So it's not by chance that we've made the progress that we have, and we're going to be talking about some of the really exciting things that we're talking about today. WENP is a really powerful partnership because of the breadth of different people that are involved in it. We're lucky to have really good financial support from our local authorities, who are fully on board and committed to trying to bring nature back across the west of England. So let's have a show of hands from those who are here from our local authorities here in the west of England. And then alongside the local authorities, we've got charities, Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, Avon Needs Trees, Forest of Avon, National Trust, Woodland Trust, and lots more that I probably should have written a list, so I wouldn't lose track of where I got to. But put your hands up if you're one of those charities and third sector organisations that's working here in the sector. And then finally, we've got our water companies, Wessex Water and Bristol Water, who have been really key supporters and proponents of that trust. So put your hands up if you're from the water companies. Brilliant. So it's the power of that partnership and bringing all those people together that's enabled us to get where we are today. So WENP started off back in 2012 looking at influencing. How do we get everyone together who's interested in nature in the area to begin to have more of a voice with decision makers, with politicians, with others on how do we get nature built into what we're doing. And WENP's done a really good job over the years of influencing the strategies in the local area, the green infrastructure strategy, lots of other strategies looking at planning and how we get into that agenda and start to affect that, which, to be honest, is a reasonably easy job in the west of England because we've got people involved from all the councils who are passionate about doing that as well. So initial focus on strategy. WENP's also pioneered ecosystem mapping, and I know there's probably local nature partnerships right around the country who will say they've pioneered ecosystem mapping, but we've some really interesting work here looking at how wildlife actually disperses across the landscapes, mapping where our really important habitats are, where the wildlife corridors are, and starting then moving on from kind of some of the award-winning work we've done on mapping to, right, so what do we then do with that? And we began to look at where the gaps are in the network and where are the places that we need to fill those gaps so that we can strengthen the ecological resilience of the whole area and get wildlife coming back. So over the last few years, we've really been focusing on how do we move beyond strategy, how do we get to the point where we can actually get some big impactful projects on the ground, filling those gaps in the network, getting the connectivity working, and looking at how we can get a mix of support from the public sector, private sector, philanthropy, all the normal grant funders coming in to fund some of that work and enable us to do what we're doing. So that's led to a lot of what you're going to hear about today, the Local Nature Recovery Toolkit, the priority programmes, which are looking at specific areas around the west of England, where we're really excited to be talking to people about what we're trying to do and how we can all work together to make those things happen on the ground. So the only thing remaining for me to say at this point is thank you all very much for coming. and to thank our sponsors and supporters here today who've made the event possible: AtkinsRealis, EnTrade, Triodos, and the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority. So thank you very much to them. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to hand over to Tim Scoones to set the scene for the day. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ian, and welcome everyone. I'm Tim Scoones. I'm going to be your host for today. So I'm from here. I walked here. I live literally just over on the other hill. So I'm a proud resident of Bristol for the last 25 years. I've also been involved in nature recovery in one form or the other, in science or in media, pretty much all of my life. So I'm immensely proud to be here amongst you and to celebrate where we've got to so far with the partnership, and crucially, where we go next and how high we can fly. Today is an inflection point, I believe, in where we've got to with the launch of the strategy, the first, well done, West of England, the first in the nation. It's an incredibly exciting moment, as we say, as we bring people together to put nature back together. It really is exciting, and as I say, incredibly proud to be here and to find out just exactly where we're going next. So lots of opportunity to meet each other in an extended lunch break, and you'll get to meet all the programs, the teams directly. So really, it's a really good opportunity to exchange ideas and passions, frankly. So enough from me for now. So in a second, we're going to hear from Dan Norris, our mayor. We will also hear from Mary Creagh, the Nature Minister, and then Tony Juniper from Natural England. But before we do that, here's a little short film just to introduce you to the West of England Nature Partnership.
Our region is blessed with a great diversity of natural habitats, home to a huge range of species, large and small. The West of England Nature Partnership is an active and ambitious coalition of NGOs, local authorities and many other partners. We're working together at a regional scale to get more done. But now we need to go to the next level. We have bold plans on a truly landscape scale to reverse persistent declines in biodiversity and empower its recovery so that nature can thrive again, working at full power. We're the first English region to launch a coordinated plan for nature and our very own local nature recovery toolkit, which will inform and inspire action for nature right across the region. Our vision for the West of England is of reconnected landscapes where nature and people can thrive together through a joined-up network of natural habitats and wildlife corridors, and greener, more resilient neighbourhoods wherever we live. We can all play our part, and we can all reap the benefits. Over the next few years, our programmes and the wider benefits they bring need further funding and investment to fully realise their potential as we bring people together to put nature back together. Our aim is to see nature thriving again all around us, restored, reconnected and recovering.
There's Dan. There's Dan.
Right, hello everybody. Can you all hear me? Thank you. That feels like the longest walk when you do that walk, just so you know. Okay, now I heard Ian say, who was there at the beginning? Put your hands up. Can you do that again? Now, that was 2012. I thought it was 7 billion years ago. So you're looking pretty good at the very beginning. But look, it's absolutely fantastic what has happened with the partnership. And I am so proud that we are the very first to be completing our bit of it. It's something that is a real achievement. I hope you all feel very proud of that. I hope that you understand that I and the West of England Combined Authority really understand and appreciate what you're doing. We get the stuff that we know about. We also know all the unknown things that you are doing as well, which are also very important, the networking, the persuading, and all the rest of it that goes on to make something like this a great success. Last night I was, along with my colleague Kerry McCarthy, local MP and Minister of course, going through the division lobbies in Parliament. I think we went through 9, 10 times, a lot of times. And as we went through, we were voting through things like Great Britain energy, a whole range of other investments to bring about the change that we need, not just economically, but also in terms of the environment and nature. And it's hugely important. And I don't know how many of you will share my view, but I feel somewhat despondent by the result in the election in America, because I feel that that means the work we do is all the more important now, because there are people who are in denial, who are going to be, like that, really closely spliced to energy companies that produce oil, coal, various other things, doing all the things that we would not want to see. So it makes what we're doing all the more important. It makes it all the more important that we stand out at this particular challenging time and show how it can be done. And I know when I talked to Steve Reed, the Secretary of State for DEFRA, how much he appreciates what we're doing. Because we're leading from the front, that's what's needed. We've got to persuade others. Our job is a persuasion job as well as a do job. And I care like you passionately about things like making sure there are pollinators, planting trees, and so on. And my job has been to bring some of that money, and I hope that direction and that energy to make sure that we get onto what we need to achieve. I hope that you feel supported by what the West of England Combined Authority is doing. Please feed back to me and others if there's anything that you think we're missing, because we don't pretend to have a monopoly on ideas or virtue in any of these things. What I feel is that the partnership is so important because it's about that collective, it's that working together, that's that dovetailing, sharing best practice, sharing good ideas, sharing enthusiasm, sharing energy, making sure that we are talking out there and persuading a public that is sometimes cynical, I'm afraid. Because I think the biggest challenge of our time, despite a lot of things, is the climate emergency. Without question, in my view, there is a climate emergency, and if we're going to really deal with it, we should have been doing it yesterday, in my view. But we can only do the best we can do, and I am very enthused and very proud of you and all that you've been doing. So thank you very much for being here today. I hope I get round to speak to many of you. That my job is to listen today, not to speak too much. And hear and learn and get your enthusiasm and your continued support. I hope that we do the math. 2012, 12 years. We've done 12, 14 years, is it? 12, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I think. Well, whatever, 14. I look forward to you doing the same amount of work, if not more, in the next same period. You can tell those votes are taking their toll, can't you, Kerry? I can't do my mental arithmetic. But look, it's really important that you keep up what you're doing, because what you've done so far has been fantastic, but what you have to do has to be even more fantastic over the same period ahead. So let us know how we can do that. Let us know how government can do that. Let's work together. Let's really make a difference. Let's make it so that future generations turn and remember that we, all of the people in this room and many others, were the people that changed the course of environmental history and nature history to improve it and make it for the better. Thank you very much.
Nature Minister Mary Creagh can't be with us today, probably in and out of the lobbies by the sound of it, but she has sent us a special message to launch the conference today.
Hello everyone. I am sorry I cannot be with you today. Restoring nature is a key priority for this Labour government, but we cannot achieve this on our own. Everybody has a part to play. individuals and businesses, communities and local authorities. We understand the value of putting power in the hands of local people to make decisions about what works best for them. Local nature recovery strategies make this a reality. These ambitious new tools, led by local areas, set out shared priorities for nature and the environment. Ones that can be delivered through evidence-based practical actions in places where they will have the greatest impact. You are part of a mosaic of local actions happening across England that together contribute to our national environmental targets. I am delighted that today marks the launch of England's very first local nature recovery strategy. My congratulations to Mayor Dan Norris and colleagues from across the region who have worked so hard on this. The West of England's Combined Authorities strategy is the product of collaborative and ambitious work. From the banks of the Severn Estuary to the beautiful Avon Valley and the rolling hills of the Mendips, this region is home to some wonderful places for wildlife and nature, which this strategy will help to connect, expand, protect and restore. Government has put in place policies like biodiversity net gain to help drive this forward, and we will continue to look at how we can use local nature recovery strategies to make the best use of public funding to protect and restore nature and create great places for wildlife and for people. I'd like to say a final well done for your brilliant achievement at being the first LNRS. I look forward to hearing about your next steps for and your future success of the West of England's local nature recovery strategy. Thank you.
You can't hear a good speech too often, can you? Good morning, everybody. My name is Tony Juniper. It's my privilege to be the chairman at Natural England and my pleasure to be able to join you this morning at what is really an historic moment to share a few thoughts about the significance of this journey that we're now on, marked today by the publication of the first local nature recovery strategy in England. Now, the significance of this, I think, is that we see this emergency unfolding before us right now in terms of not only climate change, but the unravelling of the Earth's web of life. We sometimes refer to it as biodiversity, but it's more profound than that. Only last week, I was lucky enough to accompany Mary Creagh, the minister you just heard from, plus our Secretary of State, plus senior officials in the British government, to join the Global Biodiversity Conference of the Parties in Colombia. And I have to say, there was incredible energy there, a gathering of local community representatives and indigenous groups, banks, businesses from different sectors, global scientific bodies, different kinds of conservation organisations, and of course governments coming together alongside international agencies to discuss the emergency at hand. And there was palpable ambition that we need to get on with this job of nature recovery. But of course, taking a global view is only going to be as good as what happens on the ground in particular places, because we can set as many targets as we like on the global stage, but we will continue to fail to meet them, as we have done following pretty much every previous COP, unless we can get traction at ground level. And that's why it is so exciting to be in this room today to see exactly the same group of actors, local government, businesses, financial organisations, wildlife agencies and local communities, plus a range of different industrial sectors, sitting together to be thinking through what they can do together. Because if we are going to succeed, we need to not only think globally, but also to act locally. And this is where today we see a shift in gear in terms of what we've been able to do over previous decades, because we have had a framework for conservation in this country that was invented back in 1949, 75 years ago. Next month, we had the first legislation to set out our national plans to conserve the natural environment. And if you look at what's been achieved, it's not an inconsiderable set of good outcomes that we've managed to secure. But if you look at the data about the state of habitats and the populations of wildlife, we are still in a period of decline, which is really not where we need to be at this moment. And so we need to do something different. And the local nature recovery strategies are that thing that is different, because what we've lacked in the past is the ability to act at scale, the ability to work in proper partnerships, and an inability to see common priorities. And what these local nature recovery strategies will do is to help close some of those gaps, to be able to see the bigger picture across a larger area, not just a particular nature reserve or a particular animal or plant, but to look across an entire English county or a combined authority area to start seeing some common priorities. I was lucky enough to be a student in Bristol many years ago, and this is where I learnt a lot about ecology and conservation, working as a volunteer actually with the Avon Wildlife Trust and the British Association of Conservation Volunteers, as was, going out into these wonderful landscapes around here to visit the grasslands, to see the woodlands, the wetlands and the coastal areas, and to be inspired about the possibilities for nature into the future. And we were working on little disconnected sites, a bit of woodland here, a bit of grassland there, and some of us in those days imagined what it would be like to move from this mindset of conservation and into this new place of nature recovery. These two things are very different, and we've been trapped in this conservation mindset for too long, and now we need to broaden our horizons and to see those little patches of woodland and grassland and wetland not as places that we need to protect in aspic, but kinds of lifeboats that are coming ashore with the inhabitants now moving into new territory. Those animals and plants that have been so restricted now having a chance to once more recolonise the landscape. And for too long, the reason we were in that conservation mindset was because we had taken a rather narrow view of the importance of the natural world. For too long, it was seen as the domain of botanists, ornithologists, and people interested in butterflies. And as a result of that, the more important job of economic growth always took priority. And the loss of nature was regrettable, but it was seen as inevitable. We had to grow the economy, and therefore a loss of a bit more nature here and a bit more nature there, we will have to tolerate that for the bigger goal. But now we know that without nature, we will undermine our health, wealth and security. We need nature to be able to sustain our food and water supplies, to adapt to climate change, to be able to inspire people, improving their health and well-being, and to be able to secure all of that through an integrated approach that sees economy and ecology as two sides of the same coin rather than alternatives, choosing one or the other. So this gives us an opportunity to now give life to that different mindset where we can now see that nature is fundamental to everything that we need, and to be able to put in place the kinds of approaches whereby we can start to join up these different needs of society, because we do need food, we do need houses, we do need to be able to provide for different kinds of natural resources. But all of that at the same time needs to be done in a way whereby we are restoring the fabric of this planet's web of life. And that's the opportunity we have today. And this particular plan that's being published is the first of 48 that will run right across the country, counties and combined authorities, to give England the template that it needs to deliver on that global set of goals that were being reinforced last week, including by British ministers sitting behind our flag at the United Nations, recommitting to that global framework. Think globally, act locally. This is our opportunity to really give life to that thought. And I really congratulate the West of England Combined Authority and the West of England Nature Partnership in producing a really high quality plan that I hope will set the tone for the other 47 that are going to follow. Thank you so much for being here, and congratulations. Thank you. Let's sit here. Let's sit here. Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
Pleasure.
Especially as you've clearly travelled quite far.
Yeah, I'm a bit dizzy.
So I now want to introduce Kerry McCarthy, well-respected, long-time MP of Bristol. Delighted to have you here, Kerry. Kerry is also now the Minister for Climate. So our country needs you, Kerry. No pressure, mate, particularly after yesterday's announcement. But you are perfectly placed to inform us at this stage, really with your local hat on. You've been talking globally, it's all about local. So how does this feel from the perspective of a bit of Bristol, communities, everything happening on the ground, everyday life, growth imperative, the whole thing? How does it feel on the ground, even in a city and a region that's actually known for its propensity towards environmental issues and a slightly renegade attitude to, we like to do things differently around here? So how does it feel from your perspective?
Well, I suppose, the starting point, it's incredible that we have managed to be first. I suppose it's not surprising given all the work that's gone on in Bristol. But if I look at my constituency of Bristol East, we've got incredible projects like, the Troopers Hill, the regeneration of that, but a really dedicated group of volunteers there. We've got Nightingale Valley. We've got other areas like Stockwood Open Space, which I think most people don't even realise exists, but the Wildlife Trust has done some good work there. But my worry is, how do you actually, I was going to say cement, that's totally the wrong word when you're talking about nature, but because it does rely on brilliant local groups, there's always the danger that if those volunteers move on to other things or just get burnt out or move away, that how do you make sure that it is protected in perpetuity? And actually, Arnesvale Cemetery is a really good example, because that was down to a couple of people that camped outside the cemetery. I don't know if people know the story of it, but it was owned by somebody up in Liverpool, and they just camped outside, and eventually I think they managed to buy the land for £1. And although it's a cemetery, it's incredibly diverse in terms of the nature and the trees. It's a wonderful green open space. And it's had a lot of lottery funding, and I think now it's at the stage where it is protected. But what concerns me is just in the past year or so, there's 2 patches of land that, according to the local plan, both the current iteration and the next iteration, are protected, but somebody is prepared to pay a lot of money for that land. We've got a bit of a land near Nightingale Valley that's the next up, and that is because they think at some point they will be able to persuade the council or whoever to give them planning permission, because otherwise it's worth nothing to them. So my one things I want to make absolutely sure is that the planning system protects it. I think there's also a lot of work that be done. I was talking to Tony earlier and have done for a long time about nature-based solutions to climate change. So if we can sort of really recognise the value of what we've got, and it's not just in the 2019 election, there was this real race for, if somebody said, we're going to plant 1 million trees, the next party said, we're going to plant 2 million, and then it was 3 million. And it's not just about the number of trees, it's about those ecosystem services and, the peatlands, the wetlands, there's so much that we could do. But if you've got to almost give it a monetary value, you've got to, because that's the way that you will ensure that it's protected for years to come. So I'm really interested in how we protect it. The land use framework that the government is due to publish, I think before the year end, I think will be a really important part of that. But it is that recognising, as Tony said, it's not just about nice to have birds, bees, butterflies, somewhere nice to walk your dog. It is far more important to the health of the city. The final thing I'll say, I know Emma Howard-Boyd's here, who's just done a big report for Sadiq Khan in London about resilience. And that is not just about, we talk a lot about how we cope with energy efficiency, keeping people warm, but actually cooling is going to be a major thing as well. And Mary and I were on the Environmental Audit Committee together when Mary was chair of it, and we did a report on heat waves then, and greening our urban environment is such an important part of bringing down temperatures, and I think we need to start factoring in things like that as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Kerry. So, Dan, looking at the next, we're looking at all sorts of levels here. What we can do as individuals, as neighbourhoods, as communities, as constituencies. And now we have this relatively new structure, this new level, one could say a bureaucratic level, but actually in my researching and articulating of the plan, it is clear that there are certain things that work better at different levels because of economies and scale and everything. So you're now representing that level where you're bringing together quite large numbers of people. First of all, I'd just like to salute you for the fact that you took leadership on nature. You didn't have to, and you made it a personal mission to make this something that this combined authority area will be proud of. And I think we should all salute you for that, because not everyone would have done that, particularly with the massive agendas that would have frankly been easier to back. So I'm just interested to know why you did it, and why you think it's important that we not only see things, make things work better by working at the regional level, but also to put nature at the heart of it, the green thread, as your authority has said, running through things. So why do you think that it's important to address it at a regional level?
Okay, well, thank you, Tim. I mean, look, thank you for your kind words. I'm not sure that I totally agree with you, but thank you anyway. It's very nice to get praise when you're a politician. Well, I think it's because as the world has got more complicated and more technological, we have kind of lost a sense of who we are as human beings. Technology brings massive advantages, but it also brings huge challenges. And that also includes for what we actually are as human beings. And I think nature is centre to that. And when I think of my fond memories of childhood or young adulthood or whatever it is, what I often go back to is the beauty of nature and sometimes the challenges of nature. I remember, for those who are listening, it wasn't that long ago, but when I was a child, you'd drive anywhere and the front of your car would be covered with insects, wouldn't it? You just do not see that anymore. You used to see lots of butterflies, bees, other insects, other pollinators, moths, so on and so forth. Those things weren't just important from the nature point of view, they were important for me as a person, as a human being, my connection with the wider world. My pride of this region, which I think is the most beautiful region in the country, and I think it's right that a mayor should think that. But I really do believe that, and that's because of nature. It's because of the beautiful connectivity between us as human beings and the natural environment, and that is very, very important to me. And I'm very pleased to say that that's also the case for my new chief executive, Stephen Peacock, who is very keen on these things, always has been, and that work will continue. And whatever mayor comes in the future, that will continue, and that must continue. It's very, very important. Well, I suppose one of the things I'd say, though, is that you talked about bureaucracy, Tim, and I'm glad you did, because bureaucracy is important, actually, as long as it doesn't get overpowering. But what I actually think is that what we have to work on as a group of people interacting through that bureaucracy is to make sure we create the language that regular people can use to identify and relate to the important issues that we're dealing with. And one of my frustrations as mayor has been the use of acronyms and sort of in terms, which I think are a bit elitist, a bit exclusive. And I think we have to turn that around and talk about nature and the environment and the challenges and the good things that are happening in a way that my grandmother could understand or small children could understand. Because unless we get buy-in from absolutely everybody, we will not achieve what we want to achieve, and we certainly won't achieve it as quickly as we need to. So part of this is about the language of the way we communicate, the way we inspire, the way we bring people on board is hugely important. And we haven't been good enough at that. It's felt a bit like your point, Tony, about, sometimes it's about feeling that, we've started off and it's been scientists and what have you, noble, good people, but not connecting, not bringing around the sort of traction we need with everybody in community. If we're excluding anybody, we're not doing our job. So my one plea today is, please, in whatever you're doing and whatever you're communicating and whatever information you're putting out there, think about, can everybody get it? Obviously, it doesn't need to be patronising, but it does need to connect.
Brilliant, Dan, thank you. I think you're speaking exactly to the inflection point that I mentioned earlier on. I think we really are at that point where it's not the specialists anymore. Of course, they're all involved. This is about all of us. This is for all of us and about all of us. We can all play our part. We can all reap the benefits, as we said in the film. And that that language, I think, is so important, but also being big tent about everything. And that's what I think is so wonderful about today, and why today does feel like an inflection point, not because of what's happening on stage, but because of who's in the room. And I salute you all for coming and joining us and saying, where do we go next? So talking of next, Tony, so we're the first. Should we say that again? We're the first. And that's great, and so we should be. And I think, you know, I'm incredibly proud of what the partnership have done. I've been lucky enough to come in and help them articulate, you know, their plan. A great team, ready to deliver, you know, really on it, now inviting new partners. So how does this now, what happens next, Tony, right, on the national picture, right? So how long is it going to take until everyone's got their LNRSs and we're all cooking on gas? And what does that mean when you add them all up?
Yeah,
Not gas.
well, yes. So one thing that's really, really important about this process is the conversation that led to the publication of the document. And so what we've had over many years is quite a lot of documents published, but which lacked the conversation involving everybody that brought it to life. And so what we've got here is a very different opportunity compared to what existed in the past. This huge coalition, this great breadth of interest from official bodies like ours through to local communities, businesses, finance, everybody in between, to be able to move together in common cause. So this is a real opportunity that didn't exist before, connected to some really exciting new policies that weren't there before as well. So, for example, landscape recovery, which is a government scheme inviting land managers to work together at scale to do nature recovery in a way where we're restoring entire ecosystems. That didn't exist before. We've got biodiversity net gain. That didn't exist before. If you connect that to the work of the wildlife agencies, local authorities, what businesses want to do anyway, plus the existing protected area network, you can see a huge new opportunity beginning to emerge. Now, the thing about these local nature recovery strategies is that they are a statutory requirement on counties and combined authorities as a result of laws in the 2021 Environment Act, right? So quite a lot of what we've been doing for years is writing reports, and it's the Wildlife Trust and it's the RSPB and maybe a bit of Natural England, all great stuff, but this stuff has got statutory underpinning. And what I'm hoping is that this will now transform the conversation. And, you know, you mentioned planning permission, Kerry. This is a really important one right at the moment. 1.5 million new houses planned during the course of this Parliament. What has hitherto happened until this point is that developers come forward and then they make a proposal and then they discover that they've got some dormice, or they've got a rare habitat, or they've got some newts, and then a massive argument breaks out. And this is where the bureaucracy then is cited as the terrible thing that's holding back economic development. And this is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is to say that we've had disintegrated planning. Because on the one side, we need to plan for nature's recovery. On the other side, we need to plan for housing and infrastructure. And these two things only ever meet right at the end. And so you have this massive argument, lawyers get involved. Wouldn't it be much better if we said, these are the places that are really important for the environment and for nature recovery, and these would be the much better places to build houses, and we have a joined up discussion whereby the ecologists and the developers and the planners are speaking together early in the process, thereby saving everybody a lot of grief and a lot of argument, and delivering our houses and delivering nature recovery. So that's the future that we're working towards at Natural England, and hopefully this set of new tools, including the local nature recovery strategies, will give us the ability to do this. You know, and talk about green belt being built on in some parts of the country, renaming some of it grey belt. Okay, maybe that's a discussion that we need to have. But which bits of the grey belt, and where do we need the nature recovery, and how do we bring these things together? And that's a different conversation to the one we've been having for years, which is, oh, we need the houses, the nature's got to go. And, you know, so hopefully we're moving into this more integrated, more joined up perspective. And Kerry mentioned the government's new land use framework, which is going to be of huge importance for this as well. And these locally derived strategies that have involved all this wide range of people, that's a genuine reflection of what people think in a local area. And so if we put that alongside a land use framework, which is working at a slightly bigger scale, plus opportunities we've got now through the planning and infrastructure bill, which is going to go through Parliament, if we can join this stuff together, we can have our cake and eat it. And that's what we have to aim for. And I think with this kind of process, we've got a real opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for, let's hear it from Mr. Juniper. Thank you all for helping frame the conversation today, and I'd just like to say a very warm welcome to our big tent.
Thank you. Brilliant. It's a very nice tent.
It's a lovely tent, and it's going to get lovelier and lovelier as we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for our wonderful first panel.
Thank you all. Thank you all of you.
Very quick.
Right. Hand you off.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Brilliant.
So, yes, thank you all. I think we've got off to a good start here. We can see the context in which we are operating, but actually, it's all about the plan. It's all about the plan that many people in this room have spent a large amount of time putting together. So it is my immense pleasure to introduce Zoe Davies, who is the lady who holds the plan for the partnership and really kind of guides us all and marshals us all. So over to Zoe to talk you through what it's all about. Zoe.
Hi everyone. I feel quite emotional standing up here looking at all of you. This is so exciting. Before I start, just in case they don't get a plug, I just want to thank the Heart of BS13 for our absolutely stunning dried flowers along the front. They are so beautiful. Bristol grown, Bristol arranged. They're absolutely gorgeous. So, I don't think I need to say it again, but I'll just say it one more time. Today we're publishing the first local nature recovery strategy in England. That's it, said. And alongside it, we're also publishing our very own toolkit and a set of priority programmes that are going to turn that strategy into action on the ground. As Tony said, there will be 48 local nature recovery strategies across all of England. They're a requirement of the Environment Act, and the statutory functions that LNRSs must serve is to map the priority areas for nature recovery in the region and to say what the priorities are for nature recovery in those areas. The intention being that they will then knit together to form a national nature recovery network. I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of what we're publishing today, but please do explore them yourselves via the QR codes on your table, and later over lunch visit all of the programme teams around the room as well. Just quickly on the kind of governance and the geography of our LNRS. So Dan Norris, our Mayor, is the responsible authority for the West of England LNRS as appointed by the Secretary of State. And our 4 unitary authorities, Bristol, Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset, as well as Natural England, are the supporting authorities, meaning they have a statutory role in signing off the LNRS. What I'm about to present is the hard work of many, many people over many years, but of one person in particular, our LNRS project manager, Stuart Gardner, who I can't see, but Stuart, please wave. There he is. Honestly, thank you. Thank you so much, Stuart, for everything you've done over the last 2 years to get us here. It is phenomenal. I think everyone agrees. So, to business. There we go. This is the local habitat map for the West of England. It shows you the areas that are already of importance for biodiversity. So that's the sites of special scientific interest and other national and international designations. And then it shows you the areas that could become of particular importance for biodiversity, or as we've called them, focus areas, to get around that tongue twister. The focus areas are the result of extensive analysis and consultation. They draw on many, many forms of evidence, including the Nature Recovery Network modelling that WENP commissioned back in 2020, and lots of other data, all of which you can learn about at the Toolkit. The aim of those focus areas is to target effort and resources for nature recovery to the places where they will have the most impact. For example, there will be a 15% uplift applied to the value of biodiversity net gain units in focus areas. Specifically, that uplift will only be applied to habitats that align with the recommended actions that have been mapped in that particular area. So here you can see the mapped recommended actions for woodland across the west of England. So that's for woodland management, restoration and creation measures. And then this rather lovely thing is a direct snapshot from our toolkit, which shows all the recommended actions that have been mapped for the whole west of England. And here we've zoomed in on the area between Bristol and Bath. So you can see the River Avon and the River Chew kind of going across it at angles. In future, it's possible, maybe even likely, that there will be more direct policy links between LNRSs and, for instance, the planning system. There's currently consultation on the role of LNRSs in local plans, for example, and also their role in environmental land management schemes is being looked at as well. So they might be used to target payments towards actions that align with the LNRS. Those are policy changes that we'd be very interested in, and also we've designed the toolkit with them in mind. So farmers can easily go onto the toolkit and find the stewardship actions that would align with the LNRS in their area. I think it's important to stress that the focus areas are designed to inform and to steer nature recovery efforts, but we're very clear that we need nature everywhere, not just in those defined areas, which is why we developed the toolkit to support the delivery of the LNRS, but also to support nature recovery everywhere across the region. If you go on the toolkit online, you can zoom in on any part of the west of England and you can find information and resources about what to do for nature in that particular area. You can also filter by species or the type of action that you're interested in, or the kind of stakeholder that you are. You can filter by business or farmer or community, and you'll be signposted as well to potential sources of funding to deliver the actions that you're interested in, and guidance as well. This toolkit is a vital part of our LNRS. It empowers anyone in the region who wants to take action for nature. And we're so proud of it and proud to be publishing it today. We're also really keen to share our learning. I'm looking at Stuart. Is Stuart keen to share his learning of producing this with colleagues elsewhere who might be interested in doing a similar thing for their LNRS? So, the toolkit is to empower everyone to act for nature, but our partners, you, are the people and the organisations with the greatest responsibility for and the greatest interest, really, in nature's recovery in the region. So you agreed to take it to the next level and translate that strategy into some truly landscape-scale, high-impact programmes. And the 9 programmes that we're launching today that you can see around the room represent those cross-partnership, regional strategic priorities. I'm not going to explain them all in detail now. I think we'd be here maybe a bit too long. But please do, like I say, have a look at them via the QR codes and definitely go around and talk to our programme leads over lunch. These programmes are informed by and linked to the LNRS, but nature is messy and it's fluid, and we're not limiting our delivery plans to within those focus areas. They're, like I say, informing and steering. And any projects that we develop will be done hand in hand with landowners and communities to make sure that they work for everyone. We're also very committed to delivering co-benefits alongside nature recovery. So improving people's health and well-being, enhancing our resilience to climate change, building our skills and knowledge in the region, and also supporting our farmers and landowners to diversify their income streams. I genuinely believe that these programmes represent an opportunity to enhance our quality of life in the region, and I'm really excited about them. But this is only the start, and today we're coming together, and I'm asking you, and we're asking each other, partners current and future, to join us on the next phase of the journey. Some of these programmes are already delivering, but they need to be scaled up and taken to the next level. Some of them are more conceptual, and they need capacity building and expertise to shape them into those deliverable programmes of work that the partners have envisaged. So over the next 6 to 12 months, our plan is to turn all of these programmes from at least concept into development, and some of them, ideally, into delivery. As part of that, we'd like to identify opportunities to develop projects that are suitable for private sector investment, and we'd be really keen to work with any partners in the room who are interested in working with us on that. This is a long-term commitment for us. I think we'd like to have the bulk of these programmes delivered by 2030, or at least well established and in rolling delivery, which aligns also with when we plan to refresh our LNRS, but with a longer term plan up to 2050. And I just really look forward to working with all of you on the next phase of that long journey. I just personally feel really grateful to have such a wonderful group of partners around me, because I know that you're all going to make the next stage of that journey and all of that hard work just really fun. So thank you very much, everyone. It's great to see you all, and hope to speak to you all over the course of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. We are right behind you. Thank you for your leadership. It has been fantastic, as I'm sure many people in the partnership will know. So I'd now like to invite our next panel up onto stage. So we're going to look ahead a bit now. Look ahead at saying, where do we go next? So in order to inform, guide, inspire, cajole, and provoke us, we've got 3 big thinkers on the stage. And more importantly, people who've done a lot of doing as well as a lot of thinking. We have Bevis Watts from Triodos Bank. We have Zoe Metcalfe from consultants AtkinsRealis. And we have Stephen Peacock from the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority. So just to kick off, because obviously the whole thing about partnership is people bring different skills and experience to the table. Let's just find out where you lot fit in, just a headline as to where do you fit into this fabulous jigsaw that is the partnership. Bevis.
Well, Triodos Bank, I suppose, is regarded as a pioneer of sustainable finance, and in recent years we've been developing various models for investing in nature's recovery and delivered some significant transactions in that space nationally. Yeah.
Fantastic. Zoe.
Hi everyone. So my area of expertise is at the nexus of nature, health and climate, and I actually joined AtkinsRealis 3 years ago because I realised the point to influence was through a very large engineering consultancy firm, because we need to absolutely leverage nature's role in terms of resilient infrastructure, resilient communities, and really here today to talk about the strategic outline business case, the case for nature and how it underpins socio-economic growth in this region.
Stephen.
Yes, hi everybody. Stephen Peacock, Chief Executive of the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority. I'm obviously the fortunate inheritor of a great team at the Combined Authority who's been integral to this work. And I can see already in my first 4 months in the new role that this truly is embedded in everything we do, but recognising the tensions that will exist where you have to make choices, and we'll come on to that no doubt soon. I was previously Chief Executive of Bristol City Council, where amongst other things, and it wasn't all emptying the bins, I led City Leap, the £1 billion public-private decarbonisation partnership. So I bring, I suppose, that sense of how do you make that big tent really feel like the public and private sectors can work together to deliver real step change.
Fantastic. So good to have you with us today. So, Bevis, I'm going to start with you. So, you've been in since the beginning. You were at the beginning of WENP. I hope you put your hand up when you said who's been here since the beginning. So, where do we find ourselves today? What's the opportunity going forward? And for this discussion in particular, what's our stretch ambition? You know, the practical stretch ambition, i.e., how high can we fly?
Yeah. And before we start, Tim, there's a lady called Becky Belfin I spotted over there who actually wrote the original application to government to have local nature partnership status. So it all started with a piece of paper in Becky's hand a long time ago. But if I think when I was inaugural chair of WENP what we set out to do, it was to have a plan for nature that you could credibly present and try and integrate into economic plans locally, into spatial planning and into health strategies as well. So I wouldn't underestimate a lot of the work that's happened here is nationally leading. Local nature partnerships do not look like this or function like this everywhere in the country. They do not draw the level of people that are now in the room today and the kind of speakers we've had on the platform earlier. So this is a hugely successful one. So there's a massive opportunity in that. But in terms of that ambition, are we at the point where that plan that is now being presented today is adequately integrated into those three different areas of strategy and so on? No. But there's great progress, as I think Stephen was articulating. We must support that as well. I think also, you know, of all of the things that have happened here, Ian earlier mentioned the mapping, the plan today. I believe it's the first in England. I think I might have heard that earlier. But also social prescribing. Bristol was the first city, to my knowledge, in the UK to have social prescribing for low-grade mental health conditions, for prescribing time in nature and so on. That started with the Avon Wildlife Trust. WENP have helped sort of then amplify that and make the case more broadly to the health sector. So there's lots of stuff to leverage. The other thing is we now have nationally a number of transactions completed in different forms, and Stephen was asking me about this earlier, but there's a colleague of mine here called Whitni Thomas, and she'll be speaking later today. I'll give a bit more flesh on all these things, I'm sure, but we've been involved in adapting the sort of first application of a charity bond, which was Trees for Life in Scotland, which raised about £2 million for their rewilding ambitions. There's a project called the Wire Natural Flood Management Project in the northwest, which is kind of an adaptation of social impact bonds, but is really an environmental impact bond. And then you've got a number of senior debt transactions where the bank has actually lent money itself off the back of carbon credits or biodiversity net gain revenues and so on. And one of them is here, it's Avon Needs Trees. And to look at that woodland plan, let's just replicate that. Let's just focus and say, okay, that works. Doesn't matter who the landowner is, doesn't matter if it's a charitable structure. How do we get the money in on the same basis? So I think our first ambition just has to be built off a lot of success. Remember that bigger, we're not yet into those plans in the right way, and then really replicate things that move us in that direction.
Brilliant. So keep doing, building, and that will build momentum in of itself. Because once you have those case studies where things are really working, it will attract greater influence and attention, I would imagine.
You'd hope so. I mean, we talked also about how to influence the financial sector, and we started this journey of trying to really invest in nature recovery in 2017, and we sponsored the UK's first conference on natural capital, which has happened again this week. It's now called the Nature Finance Conference. It's an annual thing. But since 2017, we've spent about £1 million just investing in what you need to do these kind of transactions. So we now have about 10 people that have done transactions in this space. The team need to work off financial models, data rooms. You have to have all the sort of awareness and consciousness of the kind of contracts that will be bankable if you're going to lend against BMG and other different types of revenue streams and so on. And this will be the first year where the income we're getting from the projects we finance is greater than our costs. So this will be our first year of break even. And so it's really important to understand that, because this is kind of in Triodos' DNA. this is what our customers expect us to do. If you're talking to another sort of more conventional bank or, you know, financial institutions with different criteria, different motivations and so on, that journey is not an attractive one. So the reason I really want to focus on replication and scale is we're not going to draw in all the money that's needed and other financial institutions without those replicable projects really demonstrating, you know, there's a pipeline there. So I think that's our job, is to come up with the pipeline of the projects, not just for Triodos. We need lots and lots of other institutions for the scale of investment that we'll need. And I'll maybe talk about that later. So.
Fantastic. So I'm going to jump to Stephen. So you're a man who has to balance a lot of priorities, right? You've got, you mentioned the bins. But
Not anymore.
Not anymore, yeah. But people in your kind of role, even though you may be intensely passionate about this sort of thing, you have a very difficult job to balance it all up, make it all add up. How does this sit now in your current role, where you actually have to draw this in and really make this happen, particularly if we start doing what Bevis is saying and do it more and more and more and bring, you know, make our tent ever bigger. So how does it work on the ground, if you like?
Yeah, so Tim, obviously the first thing to say is we're politically led. And, you know, democracy is at the heart of how we make the choices we do. So we have a mayor you've just heard from. We have a new government. The framework that is set for people like me is set by people who people like all of us elect. We are fortunate that in this part of the world, I think people just get this in a way that means, generally speaking, most politicians I've met in the last 5 years in Bristol and the west of England have already got in their DNA that this really matters, and it doesn't sit in contrast to economic growth. So that's almost just a framing piece. I think we do better as a place than other places when it comes to being able to start by saying these things will need to be reconciled. In my day job, the mayoral combined authorities were set up under the previous government to deliver, in effect, more money for the Treasury to deliver public services. Sustainable and inclusive. Now, those words in this audience, I don't need to tell you, we could have a long conversation about what that really means, but it is in there. So it's not just growth for growth's sake. But clearly, as you see, since the new UK government has been elected, they've said the mission is growth. And they've also talked about devolution a lot. And I think those two things really matter. That it reflects that life is just so complicated that you have to understand how systems work more, and you need to be closer to them. And so mayors have a key role to help government to understand how you knit together all of these competing agendas, creating national policy out of local action. And of course, today is another example of that. But we are producing growth plans as we speak. We're also informing the government's industrial strategy as we speak, which is all about mission number one for this government, which is economic growth. And as someone who's had to balance the competing demands in my previous job and dealing with the issues of a housing crisis, a social care crisis, an SEND crisis, there is no doubt that if you don't fix today's problems, you will not be around politically to talk about tomorrow's. So I refuse to accept them as separate rooms, separate tents. They are one. And as a place, when it comes to talking about growth, we have to be talking about it as if it is possible to imagine a mechanism by which we deliver not just the mitigation, but the recovery and the restoration. It's huge. I mean, I've read the Dasgupta stuff, you know, and I remember meeting Nick Stern in 2006. That was a lightning bolt for me. The Dasgupta stuff is sort of didn't get quite the same coverage, let's be honest, but it's just as fundamental, that balance sheet versus, sorry, I'm going to speak like a commercial person because that's who I am, but the balance sheet approach to things, which is your stock of, you know, nature and your ecosystem services rather than just GDP, which is your sort of flows. That concept, you know, is a bit mind-blowing, actually, and understanding it and being able to turn that from a funding need into an investment opportunity is, I believe, the journey that we went on as a set of connected systems around net zero. And that's why I'm really proud of what we were able to do on City Leap. But we were able to talk at COP26 about investment opportunities of 300 billion in the UK cities. Now, when it comes to nature recovery, I'm a little bit further behind in my learning. But in effect, the language of the market, the logic of capital and the reality of the challenge have to meet. And that, for me, can be done locally in a growth plan, as well as it can be done at COP16 in Colombia. You know, both things are valid, and they both have to happen simultaneously. Don't wait to be told what the answer is. Let's do it here, and the glue that this partnership brings and the connectivity and the ideas and the fresh thinking is actually what the UK government will need from us. So we are a place that creates ideas. We're entrepreneurs. We're entrepreneurs whether you work in aerospace or in nature recovery. The character of this place is we get stuff done and we create workable systems. That's why I'm so delighted to be doing the job I am.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. So it's clear that there's a mixture nowadays of, if you like, new thinking and old thinking, new framings and old framings. And there are still many people that are still in the old thinking, old framing, which is it's a zero-sum game. You either have growth or you have nature. We're going to have to just make a choice. Growth's going to win. Nature's going to gradually decline, but never mind because we've progressed. So articulating the case for nature is going to be something we're going to need to do a lot at the moment to get people into the new thinking, to change the frame, and probably to continue to do so. So, Zoe, the partnership asked your consultancy to draw up a strategic business case for nature to tackle that absolutely head on. What's your case, Zoe?
So the case is that delivering the highest ambition of the local nature recovery strategy will deliver the highest benefits to this region, without a doubt. And the current status is that the Marylebone Combined Authority has already been investing 10 to 15 million in this region in nature. But really we need to see significantly more invested in the local nature recovery strategy in the billions in this region. But the really positive findings of the business case is that the biodiversity net gain elements that could be derived in this region, that could be therefore invested in, totals £12 billion. So if we bring this to life around things like we're delivering Bristol Temple Quarter to enable our city to regenerate, enable housing, enable jobs. When those businesses are coming in, we've now got an investable pathway to say you can offset biodiversity net gain in some of these programmes that we see around the room. So we can make that tangible connection between major infrastructure, delivering growth and delivering nature in the region. The other element is around water quality, and just water quality on its own, improving water quality by looking at holding water in our landscape. So thinking about the role of habitat within our landscape to hold water in our land has significant value in improving water quality. We haven't even assessed yet, but will be assessing, what's the role of nature-based solutions as well in terms of supporting infrastructure resilience. So some of you may be aware of Network Rail have a trees and trains initiative looking at planting woodland across the whole of the Network Rail network in England. That's about 600,000 hectares of woodland. What does that equate to in this region? What's the opportunity? And how does that drive benefits for their business around the railway infrastructure? It means operatives might not be working on the line. It means that water's not eroding very expensive Victorian embankments that cost a lot to repair. It has the same benefits and impact on our water utility companies in terms of thinking about those nature-based solutions. The other element is nature's brilliant ability to sequester carbon. And again, these programmes that you see around the room have the ability to generate 1.4 billion in terms of carbon sequestration. But the points we haven't even touched on, which we, as part of the next phase we'll be looking at, is the ability of nature to create health and wellness. So we talk about social prescribing in terms of treatment and prevention, but actually nature plays a really significant role in health creation and wellness. We know, for instance, if you go for a 40-minute walk in nature, it changes your brain structure and de-stresses you. Our resilience, our foundation, our resilience of ourselves is undermined by stress. So as soon as we're stressed, we produce chemicals that then mean that our immune system becomes vulnerable, okay, and we're vulnerable to disease. At the moment in the UK, we have really poor productivity in our workplaces. We've got long-term sicks. We're paying out £1.5 million an hour on diabetes. nature has a massive role to play in actually creating health and wellness. And in this region, we've got an incredible track record in terms of connecting people to our green spaces, but there is still real inequity across this region. And the connectivity and the habitats that we've seen on some of the maps that Zoe presented earlier really demonstrate how we can start to address that inequity of access and improve health and wellness. And then the other element is education. And as you all know, I'm probably preaching to the converted. Education and the opportunity to generate skills and jobs through the new skills that we need to restore and regenerate nature is significant. We've already seen huge growth, around startups, new skills, and there's so much more. And our young people, really want to engage with that. It helps them tackle climate anxiety, and engage locally. So it's really positive. We have a lot of work to do to convince others that perhaps don't share our perspective in the room. There are lots of businesses that don't get this yet, and yet they need to play an active part. They need to be funding and investing in nature, and we need to articulate why it matters to them, why it matters to their business resilience, why it matters to their workforce. Similarly, we have a huge opportunity to work with our infrastructure partners for the benefit of nature.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zoe. So clearly there some real stretch ambitions in terms of what we need to do next and what we could do next. So back to you, Bevis. Obviously, in order to do this at scale and pace, we may need to have stretch ambitions in how we do it, how we organise ourselves and how we deliver this. What are your observations, obviously with your experience over the whole arc of this, as to at this inflection point, how do we look to ourselves and our partners to say, how do we do things differently?
Yeah, I mean, before the how, maybe I could give some perspective on scale and what we need by way of money. And I wasn't planning to say this, but I thought it was on the way here this morning. So Triodos operates in 5 European countries, including Spain. We have an office in Valencia. Thankfully, all my colleagues are fine. As for our customers, different story. Emma Howard-Boyd, who's here today, has recently led the London Climate Resilience Review, but David Shookman put a fascinating article out, I think, off the back of that. So the rainfall in Valencia, I mean, London would be in the same situation on a lot lower levels of rainfall, Bristol equally. So the speed at which we need to do things, we have to sort of really realise this is, we've talked about wake-up moments for years, but I mean, Valencia won't be talking about economic growth anytime soon. They'll be talking about reconstruction for years. It's huge. So ultimately, the scale of investment we're talking about is enormous. DEFRA themselves came up with a figure that we need 500 million of private sector finance into nature's recovery per year from 2027 onwards, rising to $1 billion in 2030. I personally think that's massively underbaked. So where are we in terms of the scale of that challenge, though, if we accept those numbers? Well, over the last 2 years, we've completed, a handful of transactions now as a bank that's put 40-odd million into nature's recovery. And it's really important we're talking about the right kind of transactions, because these are projects where money is going into decanalising rivers, woodland planting, biodiversity gain. All right, this is nature recovery. Just land transactions to buy estates or whatever, and the farms changing hands, it isn't. All right, so that's part of the smoke and mirrors we need to watch out for. Is just the finance sector claiming different things. But I'm not aware of another institution that's done anything like that scale of investment and those transactions. So we're starting 40 million over 2 years. We need 500 million a year, probably underbaked by 2027. So we have to stand back and think, okay, how do we do this in a different way? And some people in the room will roll their eyes, because about 10 years ago when the West of England Nature Partnership was set up, we talked a lot about the concept of a natural capital trust. So instead of purely thinking on a sort of single project, farm level or urban space level for investment, how do you do it properly on a landscape scale and react to what the Lawton Review said, a decade or so ago in bigger, better, more joined up. So the idea of a natural capital trust is you put all of the sort of resources into a neutral vehicle with the right governance of water companies, relevant authorities there, to then direct all of those monies in a very efficient way. So rather than sort of everybody having their own interest, Natural England provides subsidies over here, water companies trying to influence impact there, people who are procurers of biodiversity net gain there, you actually try and centralise it and govern it in a different way. And the Wire Catchment Project is a first attempt at trying to really do that with various buyers of natural flood management benefits, putting money in over a 10-year period to realise common goals. So I think we need some different structures, because otherwise we get lost in debates about land use change and land use and land ownership change and things like that. So that would be one thing. My other thing would be, if we really think big picture, I absolutely love the Wildlife Trust, having worked for them. I love the National Trust, Woodland Trust. I'm a member of virtually every NGO represented in the room. They all do extraordinary work. The thing is, they were all set up, most of them 100 plus years ago, when they were trying to stop the sort of Norfolk fens being ploughed in the case of the Wildlife Trust, or protect certain species. So if we look at what's needed now, they're all wonderful things, but what's the business model? What's the role for the next 100 years? And I'd love to see government sort of put some money in to help them come together to say, well, actually, should we be thinking about combining land ownership, maybe on a catchment scale to map over England's sort of super catchment levels and things like that. So I think if we're really going to do this at scale, we need all the sort of things I mentioned earlier, replicate, come up with the project pipelines. But I think we have to look at the governance. And maybe there's an opportunity here to do what Stephen's done on a kind of city leap basis in a natural capital trust way, which is really look at, okay, what is everything that's needed? How can people buy into that? And then where might the private sector finance pump prime it? So.
Fantastic, thank you. Big ideas there, nice and challenging, but in a very good way, and doable, let's face it. So talking of doable, so Stephen, again, at the coalface, balancing those priorities. You've seen and experienced and indeed led a transition on net zero in the past, where many people would have said, you'll never get there, you know, this is a big idea, it's not going to fit with everyday priorities. But you've seen that shift. You describe yourself as a sort of newbie to the nature game, you know, an enthusiastic newbie to the nature game. With your experience of what you've seen in the net zero conversation, where do you see nature fitting in, and what can we learn?
I'm still learning. I guess we all are, but I feel like I'm cramming at the moment. I mean, my instincts tells me that we need to get over the idea that somehow this doesn't need to operate through normal market mechanisms, because it ultimately will have to, unless we're not in a market economy, right? We are. And the thing about City Leap, and I don't want to draw just on that, but I think it's, you know, it's relevant to a degree, is to recognise the curious barriers that exist between private capital and places that it probably actually wants to go. One of the things that I have been trying to do for the last 18 months with a few like-minded individuals is to go around and talk to anybody who's prepared to listen about City Leap and why it actually is a good idea. And the most receptive people are institutional investors. They are so keen. They just don't know how to get the money in. And it shouldn't be so, should it? You should say, well, there's a logical business case to be made. There's 46 trillion, of pension money sitting around. Some of it's been told it has to be pointed at the UK. Yeah, everybody seems to want the same thing, but there is a problem, and the problem seems to be in market making. And market making can mean lots of different things. It can mean putting in upfront risk money to prove a business case. It can mean making sure that if you do something somewhere, it will work somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And in the public sector, it's one of our biggest failings, replicability, because we like to think we're all different. We're not. I mean, bluntly, you know, I would imagine the ecosystems, you know, will tell us that, right? It doesn't matter which side of a county line you are. So if it works here, and I think we are a crucible for good ideas and great thinking and strong partnerships, and it can be made to work in a way that's investable, then I think it can be replicated. That doesn't mean it will be, because what I've found with City Leap is, curiously, it doesn't, you know, you pass the message on and it somehow doesn't get taken up. We need to lean into what are those other barriers. But I do believe that market mechanisms are the thing. So I'm learning about the great work, actually, by the way, I should say, you know, the EnTrade thing is a really great example, right? Exactly that, you know, biodiversity gain, nutrient neutrality stuff, and recognising those become part of a tradable commodity. I think we just have to get our heads around the fact that for money to flow in a regulated, consistent way, we need to be looking to scale up the level of market making that is possible, and as a place that comes up with all the great ideas, I would say that, come up with the first example, and then it can be replicated through that mechanism.
Fantastic, thank you. So finally, because we're getting short on time, but do grab these people in the breaks. We've got one coming up, and great trail for later on when we're going to be looking very specifically at routes to investment and how to alter that so that things flow better. So finally to you, Zoe, stretch our ambitions a little bit. What are we missing here that we could bring into Stephen's crucible of ideas?
So I think there's a key element around looking at the risk of doing nothing or doing something. There is a big risk if we don't tackle that. We're seeing the impact of us not being joined up around health, nature and climate. We're seeing the impact on the NHS. We're seeing the pressure on adult and child social care services. So when we don't account for the true value of nature, that in itself has a value in terms of articulating it. The key aspects are around this multi-agency approach. When we bring the water companies, Environment Agency, Natural England, big business, local government together to tackle major issues in a region, we can think differently, we can innovate, and we can create a marketplace. We're seeing it happen in different parts in the world. We're seeing it happening in different regions in the UK. I think we also know that there is this real opportunity around developing new industry skills jobs through that investment, which underpins our socio-economic growth. So as I said, we've got more to do around articulating some of the value of nature linked to the programmes that we've already got. And a key activity is bringing big business into this space, educating, informing, and why they can't, why they cannot afford not to invest. I mean, it was really brilliant as part of the Be Bold Pollinator Awards. We brought Airbus, put in a competition to join that. And you might say, well, that's aviation, why are they involved? But actually, it was fantastic because they are engaging in understanding the role of nature for their people, but for their business. It means you enter into a conversation talking about natural resources, how that influences their supply chain. So the more we can be advocates and engage those conversations, both within local government, but as organisations themselves, the better.
Fantastic. So some really inspiring and indeed stretching thoughts there, but actually all based on where we've got to so far and where we genuinely can get to next. This doesn't sound like pie in the sky to me, though it does sound ambitious. But if we've got these new structures developing where we can corral money, we can look at working on a different scale, isn't it fantastic that now these wonderful people in the room have got themselves organised and could go, this is what nature needs next. And it's actually about bringing those two together, getting more and more people into the tent. So we're just going to go into our first break. Zoe, just to confirm, we're going to be back at 12 o'clock. So go and get yourself a refreshment. Most importantly, go and start meeting people. Check the badges. So it only remains for me to thank our wonderful panel, Bevis, Zoe and Stephen. See you at 12. Fantastic. Nice one. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. So we've already looked at the partnership, what it's up to. We've looked at the frameworks and the environment in which it exists, the politics, the plans, the national picture. We've looked at some ideas about how high we can fly in a very practical way and the ambitions that we can rightfully aim for. This is one of my favourite panels because this is when you get to meet the partners. And this is the true power of what's happened so far in that partnerships, it's obvious, are about partners. But this partnership has a very, very broad range of partners, all coming from different perspectives, different industries, with different priorities. And I have been, and I've said this to my dear colleagues in the partnership, I've come into this and I've been just so impressed to see a really strong team with a bold plan and high ambition, and they're ready to deliver and ready to go to that next stage. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to just 4 of them, because there are many. Zoe, I should have got a number off you as to how many there are, but of course it grows pretty much every day, so bigger and better. I'm going to read these out because people have long names, long titles. We have Emma Baker, who is Director of Environment, Customer and Compliance at Wessex Water. We have Hattie Severinsen, who is Environment and Land Use Advisor for the National Farmers Union. We have Rowena Kenny, who's Green Infrastructure and Nature Recovery Programme Manager in South Gloucestershire Council, and Rosie Walker, who's External Affairs Officer for the South West for the Woodland Trust. So as you can see, a broad range of people who are doing different things, but doing very, very well by working together. So we're going to be meeting the partners, but also exploring the idea of partnership and what we can learn, where we can go forward. So we're just going to go through each of the 4 of them just to sort of say who they are, where they fit in, and what they bring to the partnership before we go on to talking about partnership itself. So I'm going to start with you, Rosie. So who are you, what do you do, and what do you bring?
So I'm the External Affairs Officer for the Woodland Trust, and no one can ever work out what that job title means. Basically, every day is different from me. On the surface, I'm meant to work with all the local authorities across the region. I sit on the West of England Nature Partnership Board because that brings together all of these really key people together that we need to make nature bigger, better and more connected, and it really lives and breathes what it says it's going to do on the tin. We have been involved in things like the Great Avon Wood project. We supplied the trees from that, but we could not do that without partners. So we had the fantastic Forest of Avon Trust. Avon Needs Trees found the land. The Forest of Avon Trust did all these massive negotiations with DEFRA over another first land acquisition funded by DEFRA to actually get hold of the land, and worked that in with a HLF bid. And it was because of our partnership that we've got with Lloyds Bank, so another corporate partner. We were able to supply the trees and help with the design and bring all our expertise that we've developed over the last 50 years of woodland creation to that project. Our mission is to plant 50 million trees across the UK by 2030.
Wow, fantastic. Round of applause for the mission, I think. Great. So, Rowena, so you're coming at this from a different perspective again, from working within a council in a very particular area. What do you bring to the party?
Yes, really lovely to meet you all this morning. So, I work within the Climate Nature Emergency team of South Gloucestershire Council, and like all councils across the West of England area and the Combined Authority, we've declared and are taking action on the climate and nature emergency. So alongside all our statutory duties and all the priorities of work that we are delivering for our local communities, an overarching priority is around taking action on the climate nature emergency. So key work of our team is about making sure that we're embedding that across that commitment in terms of our work and decision making across all our areas of work and service. So that includes planning, highways, waste, health, education, schools and social care. So it's making sure that nature thread is really embedded and acted upon is a key area of our work. Also, the councils and everyone here, we're all very much involved in all the partnership work that's happening across the region that WENP's coordinating. So that includes quite specific working groups looking at particular areas of our work together, and then also the work to progress, develop and deliver the priority programmes that we've got the information around today and that we're launching. So partnership work is right at the heart of what we're all doing together. And a key area of work as well that the councils and others are very much involved in is around green infrastructure. So there's a joint green infrastructure strategy. And so we work together to really champion and embed the role of green and blue infrastructure that is well planned, designed and managed across all of our work in our communities for all of the points that have been highlighted today around nature recovery, climate adaptation and resilience, health and well-being. It's crucial that we have equitable access to and inclusive spaces that local people can access, which COVID, as we all know, really highlighted. So investing in those green spaces for people to access is crucial. And then also in terms of greening, creating more vibrant, healthy, resilient neighbourhoods, which also is really part of the kind of regeneration programme that we have across the west of England. Also, in terms of the health benefits, it's really powerful, the report that Natural England issued a week or so ago around the state of UK natural capital, and the health benefits alone of nature are £7 billion a year is quite incredible, really. And that was only a very conservative estimate. It was very clear to highlight. And then we're really so proud that across Bristol, South Gloucestershire, North Somerset, we've been able to work together through the West of England Nature and Health Strategy Group to be one of 7 test and learn pilot projects for green social prescribing, the Healthier with Nature programme, and that's been so successful and is now getting really embedded into the health system. And one of the key findings in particular, which for all of us within particularly the environment sector that was powerful, was just the reach that the programme has managed to succeed in terms of diversity. So 57% of participants in that programme were from our communities of highest multiple deprivation, and crucially 21% of participants were from global majority populations, so that we're really on an absolute mission, recognising that we need to make sure that everybody sees themselves in green spaces and recognises and is able to access the health benefits of nature. And then the national green social prescribing evaluation has highlighted that every pound that the Treasury spends on green social prescribing delivers a £2.42 return on investment. So that's over double. So that's reducing real tangible costs in terms of for our health services, but also crucially enabling people to live healthier, happier and better nature-connected lives, which then supports nature-positive action.
Brilliant, thanks, Rowena. Now, Hattie, I'm just going to skip over you for a second and come back to you, because there's a key link here. There's going to be a lot of talk increasingly about co-benefits of nature recovery. It's, of course, nature recovery in of itself is existentially important to us, but actually in that stage where we're persuading, we're trying to big tent everything and get everyone involved, actually the co-benefits of nature can often be the way in, the first way in, because it really matters to people on the ground. And you mentioned health. You also mentioned infrastructure, and increasingly green infrastructure, as we call it. This is my segue to Emma. Get the link. So Emma works for Wessex Water. So obviously this is your stock in trade. You are delivering that infrastructure, but you've also joined this partnership in a very beneficial way to all of us. So where do you fit in? Where does Wessex Water or companies like yourselves fit into this picture?
Hello. So we supply your water along with Bristol Water in the west of England. We also treat your dirty water. And I guess as a business, we want to do that while protecting and enhancing the environment, bottom line. We try our very best to. And actually, we are absolutely committed. So one of our 4 company values is that we will play our part in tackling the climate emergency. We see ourselves as a public service role to protect and enhance the environment of the Wessex patch and the west of England. And we've got a vision for the water environment that we've been developing with the water sector. Guy Thompson, wherever he is, deserves a shout out for this one. Been leading that for us with the Wildlife Trust, with the Rivers Trust, around sustainable solutions for water and nature. And actually that is about all of us playing a part in the catchments and the places that we live in, businesses, housing developers, water companies, farming, and it's about a shift away from a concrete treatment works, end of pipe, costs a lot of money, lots of chemicals, to something that gives us an outcome in the catchment. It's around us developing markets in our catchments. Guy, again, you'll hear from him in a minute, you'll be sick of him in a minute, about EnTrade and some of the catchment markets as a group we've developed. But we also, as a water company, want to make that shift away from those end-of-pipe solutions to solutions in our catchments and to nature-based solutions. And we think that will be massive for nature recovery in the Wessex patch and the west of England. And we want to do that in partnership, hence why we're in the room today and have been investing, quite a lot of money in various catchment partnerships going on here, and will continue to do so. We also have a significant investment plan, hopefully coming with approval this side of Christmas. And again, it might be worth us touching on later, how that investment will improve treatment and storage, reduce our spills to the environment, but actually the benefit that brings then of our investment into the place.
Fantastic, thank you, Emma. So a very different perspective there, but a very, very valuable one that really helps us move forward in a very practical way, and crucially to increase our ambition, our pace, our scale. An absolutely vital perspective is going to be the perspective of the people who live on, work on the land, and have done for generations, and really understand the land, like any biologist would, let's face it, the farmers. So, Hattie, I am so pleased, not only that you're here in the room, but that the National Farmers Union are in the partnership. So I salute you for being in the conversation. So obviously, compared to some of the other partners, you are at an earlier stage of the journey in terms of bringing your people in on this and bringing people together. Obviously, you've been talking about this for generations, but bringing it into this conversation with these other partners. Describe where you're at now and how you fit in and who you've been working with within the partnership.
Yeah, so firstly, I'd just like to say I'm so pleased I'm on this panel, because I think we all recognise that farming is key to nature's delivery, but it needs to work alongside food production. We want to be resilient and secure in this country with our food, and that is what our farmers are trying to do. There is so much brilliant work happening in this partnership, and just big respect to Stuart and Zoe. They have made sure farmers have been involved in the discussion with the local nature recovery strategy from the very beginning. There's been multiple ways for them to get involved, and it's been really, really telling with the outcome of the toolkit. I think there's so many different projects happening, and changing governments, changing schemes, moving away from basic payment schemes that many farmers had unfortunately begun to rely on so that we could all have cheaper, better food. But now we're moving to the environmental land management schemes, which is a brilliant opportunity once everyone is able to access those. So we need to keep working together. We also need to make sure that all these different partnerships are actually getting that message out on the ground. Therefore, I think a key thing for me is let's put funding into our facilitators. We've got Harry here, who's part of the cluster group in the South Cotswolds. Don't know where he is. He's at the back. Make sure you take time to speak to him. He's doing a great job.
Wave again, Harry, please.
Sorry, Harry, putting you on the spot. Yeah. But these clusters are vital. There's only so much that the NFU can do. We can point people in the right directions, but we need activity on the ground, and that support and also funding. It is just so important at the moment when there's so many inconsistencies and challenges that the farming industry are facing. And I just want to say that so many farmers have been doing a lot for nature their whole careers. They're the ones who understand their soils. There is just a million other pressures that they have to face as well.
So Hattie, I just want to tell us a little bit more about farm clusters. It's a slightly funny word, but it's an absolutely wonderful thing.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So these are facilitated groups through different organisations. So Bristol Avon's Rivers Trust have a cluster, I think, near the Chew. And it's a funded group that has a facilitator that brings farmers together in a local area. It's that local network. And I think the benefit of this is peer-to-peer learning. There is so much changing, and people see that there's a lot of risk attached to changing their farm practices. But by having these groups that have experts that come in, they have different people who've made changes, it gives people that confidence and support. And I'm sure we'll touch on it a bit later, but these groups are actually so important at the moment when it comes to mental health of farmers. It's an opportunity for people who work in very siloed industries, who work alone, to have an opportunity to talk to other people, and hopefully it will help improve what is currently a mental health crisis in the industry. I know morbid, but I think it's so important when you're all talking to the industry that you recognise all these additional pressures, because there is a lot of weight on farmers, and we just need to be doing the right thing and supporting them as much as possible.
So there's an interesting co-benefit there, very practical one, not only from the overall output, but the actual process of doing it.
Yeah.
That the actual process is delivering good on the ground, and I think that's really inspiring. And more strength to your elbow. I really think so. So, as I said, this is a very successful partnership. I have had so many people say that, and you should congratulate yourselves for coming together as you have done. And the rest of the country is watching. And wants to learn, as of course we want to learn from other people around the country. So just on to that point then, thanks for describing your perspective, but why do you think this has been successful, and what would you say to others about how to make partnerships more than talking shops and actually engines of change? Anyone can chuck in.
I think the way this partnership works, it gives us all space to bring our strengths forward. Because we've engaged and we have talked, and that is an important part of this. And we know each other, and we know what each other can bring. We know that South Gloss has got really good policies on biodiversity and its planning information and in its spatial planning, and we know that they really want them to be enacted. And I think that's part of it as well, is that we've all got the same belief and the same drive to achieve all this, that really gets a place to come through. So like when Matt comes to our meetings and talks about what he's doing for green villages and village greens and all of that kind of stuff, we're all like, well, we could add to that and we could do this, and we've got our expertise in bringing the community along, and we've got our expertise in which plants you need to put there, and what other things people could do, and we've got forest schools that go on our estate, and this is how we make them work, and we just are all able to bring that to that shared space.
So anyone else want to chuck in a sort of, what is it about the way you work, the support you have, the structures you have that makes this fly higher than normal? Anyone else? Rowena?
Yeah, I completely echo the points that Rosie's raised about just the real culture and spirit of collaboration and the generosity, the way that, we really support and celebrate each other's successes, recognise that we all have different expertise to bring. I learned so much from the opportunity of working alongside all the many partners here, especially the environment NGOs. Phenomenal, the expertise, the commitment and the passion that we have here in our region. And the other dimension that I think has really helped is the governance that we have too. So we have the WENP board that's providing that kind of oversight, bringing the kind of partners together, and then we have the working groups, the priority programs where we're really working together on the nitty-gritty detail. And then obviously the WENP board reports up to the decision makers, the politicians across the west of England. So there's a real clear how we all fit together, so we can then really crack on with the work that we need to do, and focus that, but also keep in mind the bigger picture. The other bit that I really want to highlight, and particularly kind of thank Mayor Norris and the West of England Combined Authority, is the Green Recovery funding that we've been fortunate partners around the room here to be able to access over the last few years, which has massively enabled us to unlock further funding, to develop our programs, to do the research, to do the engagement. That's the crucial bit, the listening, so that then we've been able to have programs that are ready to deliver, but also we've been able to get an awful lot of stuff done. So that funding has just enabled so much to be delivered. And communication as well. I mean, I was so moved the first time I saw that video that, this morning, moved me to tears. And that the power, the importance of communication is just a crucial area of our partnership and work together, and something that I know we're all really committed to about taking forward. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rowena. Emma.
I was just going to give a perspective from a business, actually,
Yeah.
or a private
wonderful.
investor.
Yes.
So I think two thoughts from me. One is we bring investment in to the place and the catchment. Avonmouth, Salford are both big capital investments for us at the moment. We're reducing our spills to the environment, we're increasing our treatment, but we're doing lots and lots of BNG at both of those sites as well. Not before statutory BNG as well, and we're still running at 50% BNG on those sites. So we bring some direct delivery on the ground from the very mechanics of our business. The second one, I think, is we are already involved. We're a key partner, and we are able to fund as a business. We have been committed for a very long time to co-hosting the Bristol Avon Catchment Partnership and to funding all of the core posts there. We are also have been funding Chew Valley Reconnected. We wish to continue to do that, subject to our business plan determination just before Christmas. We also fund the Cam and Wellow. We want to do that for the next 5 to 10 years. And again, that's an environmental scheme, but also a health programme that Bevis was touching on. And that commitment as a business, we want to do that as a partner, and we want to invest in those very local partnerships.
Great. Just a quick, before I come to you, Hattie, just a quick clarification there for those of us who aren't deep in the sector. Can you describe what 50% BNG means? Sounds great.
No, so I get well,
you
there's
probably
more
all
experts
know,
in
don't
the
you?
room. Yeah, I mean we've moved to statutory BNG now, biodiversity net gain. But before that, we also had a company commitment that we would make biodiversity net gain enhancements when we go in and do a capital scheme. So at Avonmouth, for example, we have created quite a fantastic, or we are in creation of a wetland. If any of you know Salford, between Bristol and Bath, again, we've done a capital scheme to improve the water recycling centre, but we've also done quite a lot, of wetland creation, and that's at 50% more than it had on site.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Hattie. So how is it working for you? What do you think, if you were talking to other regions, other areas wanted to do this, what's the secret of success?
Yeah, so I'm in quite a unique position that I cover the Southwest, so I'm on a range of different local nature recovery strategies and partnerships. And I think with West of England, there's a reason they're ahead of this, because you do feel really listened to, and they make sure that everyone's being heard and part of that conversation. And they had that long before these strategies were put in place, which has meant that they are ahead of the game. I think being in such a unique position, being on all the different ones, all we're asking is just a consistent message for farming and landowners. And I think if there's anyone else I know from different local nature recovery strategies here, is just making sure that you work with West of England to make sure there is that consistent message so we can get nature delivery across borders as well. So it's all around listening, and they've been listening from the beginning.
Wonderful. Thank you. So now to my favourite phrase of the day, stretch ambition, right? Aren't they doing well? Aren't you doing well? Absolutely fantastic. How do we fly higher? So from your point of view, having done it, lived it, breathed it, I'm sure there are things where you think, if only we could do this, if only this was different, if only that barrier wasn't there, we could do more, faster, bigger, better, all the rest of it. So what do you need? There's going to be a list, I can tell.
Those who know me in the audience will know I've probably got a list already. I guess the things I would talk about is a very simple delivery mechanism. So Bevis talked about pooling kind of resources, and we're really keen to do that. But at the moment, we come across regulators or regulations that don't allow some of that to happen, Tim, and it would be great to kind of release some of that. The other thing we are finding around our biodiversity net gain strategy that we need to deliver. In order to do that investment, we need to do quite a lot of BNG in Wessex and the west of England. And our experience to date, we need a simpler, clearer mechanism to be able to follow the Lawton principles, which is absolutely what we wish to do. Needs to be easier in an urban setting. It needs to be easier for watercourses. And I think then we can get some of those bigger partnerships and pooling off the ground. But at the moment, there are some constraints still in place around how you can deliver that.
Great, thank you. So, Hattie?
Go down. So 2 key things, I think, from the farmer's perspective is the language and then also access to funding. So we need to reframe the message where farmers aren't part of the problem, they're part of the solution, and making sure that when we're talking about nature, we're linking that into climate resilience and business resilience. I think there's so much that can be done with improving nature on farm that has amazing benefits to their food production, as well as just overall business. Also, farmers are looking for a lot to do with diversification at the moment to support their business in changing times, and therefore making sure that those opportunities are available to them in a way that they can understand it and access it. So that links with both the finance and the language around it, with the sort of private markets, environmental markets, BNG, all these things are new, and they want to do something, but where? And then access to finance. There's so much opportunity with environmental land management schemes and the landscape recovery projects, but there's also so many uncertainties. People aren't necessarily willing at the moment to go into long-scale projects until they know a little bit more and have seen it happen before. So we've just got to keep the communication up and make sure that we're supporting them so then they have the confidence to go into it.
So this ties back to what Bevis was saying about repetition as a next stage, is develop those those case studies so people can look in and go, my God, that happened. That actually delivered. Because, of course, people are not necessarily going to take a leap of faith on this. They're going to take a very measured step forward, aren't they? But they need to show that it's going to work, particularly for farmers, which have so many pressures and are living quite often on a knife edge, aren't they?
I think as well it's kind of understanding that here we've got different organisations, but a farming business is just a single business with only a few players in each, but we kind of put them under the same umbrella. But there's going to be farmers out there who will be better at doing a bit more intensive farming within compliance, and then there'll be others who are better to do more nature focused. We need a bit of everything, and every farm is bespoke and has a different business plan, and we've just got to recognise that they don't all fit under one umbrella sometimes.
Fantastic, really important point that. Rowena, I'm sure you've got a wish list.
I'm sure everyone in the room here has too.
To talk about over lunch, by the way.
But yeah, picking up Emma's point about regulation, I mean, the policy context is clearly so crucial to this. So I'm sure that, all of us here will really look forward to sort of hearing what comes forward from the rapid review of the Environment Improvement Plan and also the water review. So, that could really change the game for the policy level. Then other sort of things I feel is a sort of a collective challenge really for us all is just to continually reflect on who are we currently working with, who's not currently in the room, in the tent, in the forest, and can we reach out, who else can we engage with, and as you were highlighting, Tim, listen. The other bit too that I think is a sort of a bit more of the grittier end of things, which I know you were wanting us to speak to, is that it's been fantastic that there is more funding starting to come forward for investment in nature recovery and engagement in nature. And one of the sort of the challenges that also is in the mix is that we need to be able to maintain those improvements over time. So we can't just deliver something and run away. It's like with any infrastructure, our natural infrastructure needs to be cared for. And then there's also the workforce considerations. So, you know, really kind of making sure we've got enough capacity and we've got people with the right skills is crucial. And one of the challenges that we have, it's fantastic when we get, you know, large grants of money, but actually when that's for a short period of time, then at the end of that, we've got these valued, skilled people who've got, you know, really got to know the communities who maybe then can't carry on. So there's kind of looking at how we can draw in funding that will provide sort of consistent funding over time. So in South Gloucestershire, we've launched a new scheme, an Investing in Climate and Nature scheme, which is very much seeking to do that. So it delivers the benefits to deliver the natural capital uplift, and then also includes the funding to then deliver that over time. And obviously, the delivery over time includes that capacity. So I think I'd probably be there to say that probably for a lot of us in the room, that kind of, I can see some of the Wildlife Trust colleagues nodding, that is a real challenge for us. We really need to retain and also continue to develop our workforce. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, let's consider this to be the start of a rich and fruitful conversation that I want people to have throughout the rest of the day, particularly over lunch. We've met 4 partners here, but actually over the lunch break, you're going to get a chance to meet all of the wonderful partners that are working on the individual programs that are part of the big plan, if you like. So fill your boots, you know, go and meet people, because you never know, you may be working with them pretty soon, which would be very exciting. So I invite you to do that. So we are approaching lunch. Yes, we are, folks. Lucky you. And just before we do that, back to our chairman, Ian, to reflect on where we are so far. And just for now, please thank our panel.
I hope you get a sense from that last session and the whole morning about the real common purpose and positivity about the partnership. It really is a partnership where people come to the meetings not just to listen, but to contribute and to listen, actually, as Rowena was talking about, and find those collaborative way forwards to actually tackle some of the big issues and get on and do things and move beyond identifying the problem to finding the solutions. And it is about working together. It's not about demonising farmers or you know, other people. It's about finding the ways that we can work together around those common themes and the common goals that we're trying to achieve. And you know, on the farming side, we're seeing a sea change in farming and the whole approaches to engaging with these things as well, which is fantastic. So there's really positive signs coming through. So a lot of the time in the partnership, we focus on the detail of what we're trying to do and how we're going to get it done. And it was really interesting for me, the session this morning with Stephen and Bevis and Zoe, actually taking that step back and reminding us about that Das Gupta report and the bigger picture. And Stephen talking about how this needs to be integrated into what we're trying to do across the region as a whole, and really continuing to tell that story about how nature underpins health and economy and some of the things we've been talking about here, food production. There's thinking about it all in that really joined up way, and Zoe telling us about the many billions of pounds we actually need to achieve what we want to do in this area alone. So there's a big ambition and a big scale and integrated into everything that we're doing. At the conference last year, many of you will have been there in the basement at Triodos Bank. We were talking about the gap between what we know needs to happen on the ground, which everybody wants to happen, and the funding. There's funders out there who want to fund nature restoration work, but there's a gap in the middle of how we make it investable and fundable. And Stephen was talking this morning about the crucible ideas, and there was a bit of a discussion with Stephen and Bevis talking about, do we need big new structural mechanisms? Do we use existing mechanisms? And there are different ways we can go on those things and different things we can do. But it's interesting to hear about the City Leap, which actually I've had in mind as I've worked with Stuart, who was the previous WENP coordinator, and with Zoe on bringing our programme together. That kind of City Leap approach of really spelling out all the things we need to do and then finding those big investors. In City Leap's case, it's those Canadian pension funds with millions of pounds to invest. How do we cover that gap to make that investable? And I know we're going to talk a bit more about that after lunch with the next panel. Over lunch, and Zoe's going to say a bit more than this, it's the opportunity to get around and meet the teams and hear more about some of those programmes we're putting together, where we're hoping to have that conversation about how we make those investable. So Zoe's going to come up and talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But before we get onto that, I just wanted to say thank you to somebody and introduce somebody else to you all today. So I've just mentioned Stuart. Stuart was the previous West England Nature Partnership Coordinator. He's been working for the last couple of years on the local nature recovery strategy and just doing fantastic work in converting all of that work we've done as a partnership into the local nature recovery strategy. So Stuart, we'd like to give you a big thank you and a big round of applause. Would you like to come up, please, Stuart? And last thing from me before I hand over to Zoe, many of you will know that I'm coming to the end of my term as the chair of the West England Nature Partnership. It's been an absolute privilege, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that at the end of the day today. But what I wanted to say at this point was we've had an open recruitment process to recruit the new chair of the West England Nature Partnership, and I'm delighted to say that that has now concluded. We've got a fantastic new chair who's going to be starting when I leave, and I'm not going to do more at the moment. Just ask Samita to stand up so you can all see who she is. So Samita Hutchinson is going to take on the chair. Do take the opportunity over lunch and over drinks to say hello to Samita and introduce yourself and talk to her about the partnership. Thank you very much. Zoe.
Okay, just very quickly, a little bit on logistics. You will have seen all of the programmes dotted around the room. Please do go and explore them over lunch. You can chat to the programme teams. You're also supposed to be able to write thoughts down and stick them on the boards, but some of them haven't left a huge amount of space for that. So you can just either write them down and leave them on the tables, or also at the QR codes on your tables, there's a feedback form at one of the links, and you can feedback on the event itself, or also just give us any thoughts you have on what we're trying to do on the programmes. If you want to follow up with somebody, please just do that via the feedback form. I'd also like to request that we try and kind of stagger lunch so that, it's not just 200 people piling into a queue all at once. I know you're probably all quite hungry, but if you could just try and stagger it a little bit, that would be much appreciated. And finally, we'd love to get a photo of the WENP board for our shiny new website. So if you're in the board, please could you just pop up to the stage, and Anna, our lovely photographer, is going to get a photo. And I'm not fussy about what in the board means. If you think you're in the board, then you're in the board. And you don't have to be in it if you don't want to be. It's just a nice opportunity to get a nice pic. So thank you very much, everyone. And we're reconvening for the next panel at 2:00. So thanks.
Okay. Are we ready to start? Yes. Good. It's all on me. Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. My name is Guy Thompson. I'm a Managing Director of EnTrade and a former Founding Director of Natural England. It's good to see so many of you that have stayed for the afternoon session. Thank you for that. And congratulations to the West of England Nature Partnership on convening this conference. The numbers of people here, I think, speak for themselves. The energy in the room, likewise. and on the delivery of the first local nature recovery strategy for England. I'm conscious that we've had very little opportunity to involve all of you in the conversation up to this point, and the theme of the day is moving from strategy to delivery. And I hope this panel session is where the rubber starts to hit the road on the delivery piece. But I'm really keen to get as much perspective from the audience as possible, given that it's really on you to go out there and make this happen. So in that spirit, can I just take a show of hands to begin with, based on what you've heard so far today, how many of you are inspired to go away at the end of today and do something differently in moving from strategy to delivery for nature? I reckon that's getting on for probably 50, maybe 60% of you, right? Is that fair summary? Right, so our challenge panel, my challenge as facilitator is to kind of move the dial on that and get a few more hands up by the end of our session. Yeah, our session now builds on the session we had before lunch, which was obviously looking at that issue around how do we use how do we bring different sectors together to collaborate to get into this delivery space by looking at the real nitty-gritty question of funding. How do we fill the finance gap? How do we get the private investment that people routinely talk about? I was really struck when we had a pre-meeting yesterday as a panel, that we could quickly get into problem admiration in this conversation. There's a lot of references, and I'm guilty of them, to barriers to private investment, incoherence of regulation and private funding and public funding. And we will briefly touch on some of that, but what I'd really like to get out of this session, if we can please, is some examples of best practice, some leading lights that demonstrate that there's a way through these barriers and these issues, and ideas for coming away from this day, what we can do differently to perhaps build on those and scale investment in nature recovery. So that's where we're headed. We've got a number of perspectives in the panel, a philanthropic funding perspective from Liam, an institutional investment lending perspective from Whitni, we've heard earlier from Bevis at Triodos. Joe can talk to us about the local nature recovery strategies across England and the role of the landscape recovery tier of elms in particular. And then Roger, we're tasking you with a sort of placemaking perspective. So a few words from each of you on that challenge, and then we'll try and get you guys involved as quickly as possible in thinking through solutions and opportunities. So if I could start with yourself, Liam, to kick us off, please.
Great. Thanks very much, Guy. And wow, what an energy this morning that now the post-lunch shift we need to work through. I will briefly start just by a bit of reflection. I think 10 years ago, if we were together in this room, we would have been perhaps a little bit excited or intimidated if someone said, oh, we've got £100,000 for nature or £500,000 for nature. And now we're talking about tens of millions. And that shows both where we've come from, but also where we need to go further to. And not only that, there's an LNRS, someone mentioned, I think it was the first, and a mayor standing here this morning talking about how it fits in with place. So what a position to be in. So I'm I represent a philanthropic funder and investor. What does that mean? So briefly, we are impact driven. We're about supporting outcomes that deliver for the environment, community and social justice. And we do that through a range of sources of capital. So grants, which you'll be familiar with and play a really important role in this space, and social and impact investment. Now, of course, not every project needs investment, and often I think there's some confusion because actually every project needs revenue, it needs someone to buy something, but not every project will need that investment. But where it does need investment, often the conversation's a little binary between, oh, well, it's public sector investment and private sector investment, like they're one monolithic set of pots, whereas actually there's a whole spectrum, and I think the trick here is to think about that spectrum. So grant funding is really important here. We heard this morning how it can be a bit lumpy and there's a gap, and how do we fill that gap? And as a social and impact investor, that plays a niche but small but important role. What that means is that we're able to take higher risks. We can take risks on models that may be more experimental, We can be patient and seek repayment over a lot longer term than perhaps more commercially minded. And we can really tailor the grant, social investment and impacting investment into the outcomes that are needed and kind of put it together flexibly. And I think the magic happens when you blend all of that together. And what I was really interested in this morning was the idea of the kind of crucible. Often that will come together in place, and how do we actually do that, that blend in place. I think that's all I was going to say for now.
Thanks, Liam. Okay. Whitni, we heard this morning from Bevis on the leading role that Triodos has played in trailblazing solutions, in particular the wire flood risk management project. Could you give us a bit of sense of, from an institutional investment perspective, how we're going to bridge this significant gap between what's required to get an economic return on institutional investment and the current relatively small-scale, disparate nature of the project pipeline?
Well, you've set me up very well, Guy, because that is exactly what the challenge is. I mean, as people have said and continue to say, there's money, there's loads of capital out there. It's just, is it the right kind of capital to be able to invest in nature? So I think what perhaps isn't helpful, and I'm not having a dig, but it's to talk about institutional investment. Again, as Liam was saying, it's not one thing, it's not all equal. And so I think it's really important when we're talking about, you know, finding investment for nature recovery is finding the right kind of investment. Because what investors want, and we're talking about investors here, so people who expect a return on their capital, they expect a return, they want certainty, and most of them, we're probably a bit the exception, want scale. And those are all really hard things to find in what is a market that everyone in this room, you know, is basically creating. And there's no easy win-wins, because if there were, the financial system, which works exactly as it's intended to work, would have already been funding nature recovery. So there's a reason why it's not, and it's not because it's really hard to do, because those preconditions just aren't in place yet. And so the work we've got to do, and that we're trying to do with the projects that we funded, is to demonstrate and to show what needs to happen. And so the first thing we really need to do when we look at these projects is think about what's the revenue model, as Liam was saying. Because sometimes asking about funding is the wrong question, or it's not quite the right question. We need to be much more specific. Because you've got a product or service, it might be an ecosystem service, so that's what you're trying to sell, and you need to find a buyer. And so I think we need to be having a lot more time and energy and effort on those conversations around how do we bring the buyers in, how do we bring the corporates in who are going to pay for these ecosystem services, which we know need to happen and which we need to monetize. And it might be that in some instances we don't need investment, and that's great. And I think there's been too much focus on talking about finance just generally without really kind of digging into that nitty-gritty. So I think the reality is, in this sector, the first movers, they're not going to be the institutional investors. They're going to be the Esme Fairbairn Foundations of this world. They're going to be high net worth investors who make their own investing decisions. And they might even be, at some point, just ordinary investors. It's going to be really hard to unlock that pension fund money and that insurance company money. And so I would just urge people not to start there, because I just think that's going to lead to so much time and effort. And my number one advice is just to know your audience and to know what their expectations are. And that's how you can then bridge the gap and make things happen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Whitni. Joe, you have had the significant task of rolling out local nature recovery strategies nationally, as I understand it.
Don't take all the credit.
Well, leveraging obviously the real energy and talent and capability in partnerships like this. And now you're moving, as I understand it, to a new role with the landscape recovery tier of Elms. So you're really well placed to reflect, I guess, post-Brexit. Tony touched on this morning. Post-Brexit, we've obviously got the very significant shifts with the Environment Act now bringing in new mechanisms like biodiversity net gain, obviously the Local Nature Recovery Strategies and Agriculture Act now enabling this shift from production subsidies to the delivery of public goods through the ELMS scheme. So just be really good to hear from you as to how you see those mechanisms enabling the financing of the ambition we've heard about for the West of England Nature Recovery Strategy.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's brilliant to be part of such a live discussion because it's so forward-looking. So well done, WECA, and I wish you very well. You're creating a centre of gravity and establishing leadership in this place and being really, really clear about what it is you want for your place, and it's for all of us to coalesce behind that and help deliver it. So people on earlier panels were asked about their stretch target, and I thought I really like that idea. So what I would love in 2 or 3 years is for everyone here, but much more widely as well, across the other 47, to be very clear about the role that landscape recovery as a very ambitious, innovative environmental land management scheme can play in delivering these priorities. So it's the intent behind that LNRS is about coordinating and channeling existing funding, much of which is already public, and then drawing in new private finance as well. And the landscape recovery is occupying that gap at the moment. So we will use the public funding to lever in and crowd in private finance. That's already happening. We have a 2-year grant-funded development phase, and that part helps to really reduce the risk for the private sector to get involved. There are 56 projects, all of them in development phase. There's one that's ready to start selling credits. They are incredibly ambitious, ranging from 500 to 20,000 hectares, from one land manager to multiple land managers. They're complex. Each one will be invited to develop their funding model, and to the extent to which they can crowd in private finance through that by monetising the improvements that they make. So there will be some improvements that they're expecting to make that can't be monetised, and that would be the role of public funding. But those that could be monetised through net gain or nutrient mitigation, corporate donation, ecosystem services, those are all the aspects that will come together in their funding models. And those are really ambitious and new. And those are challenging because the legal and finance challenges, this is a new way of working and we have to support. So for me, a big part of this is about confidence, how we as a government agency with the wider DEFRA group, because we're all working together on this, EA, FC and DEFRA, establish that confidence through clear standards, clarity of the regulations and what's required and what our role is in that, in particular as a supporting authority in the delivery of the LNRS.
Thanks, Jo. Okay, Roger, we heard from Dan and from Stephen this morning. It'd be useful just to get your perspective on the role of WECA. Placemaker, market maker, maybe, based on what we heard from Stephen.
There's 2 fines for using WECA, by the way. I'll pick you up on that later. It's only a tenner ago. It's fine. Yeah, I'm firstly, I'm just delighted to be here celebrating this today. I think from my perspective, the partnership is so crucial. I know we've all talked about it being the first and really setting a benchmark for the country. But I think there's much more, and something we haven't talked about is the kind of co-creation element and the network that creates for us. So as a placemaker, I think understanding that our strategy has been built and the toolkit is built with our partners from across the region, and understanding their needs means that we're starting from a really brilliant place. So from a placemaking perspective, I think that's really key. Yeah, Stephen and Dan talked really positively, and Stephen, his words around our role in growth is central to kind of the organisation's kind of remit and kind of mandate that's being driven through government policy, and that's key. But Descriptors review kind of really showed that GDP is a really kind of poor kind of tool for us to use in this space, and its focus on assets and the gap it leaves in terms of understanding and depreciation on our natural assets and depreciation on assets in general means that actually that's quite a flawed model we're working with. And we recognise that market mechanisms aren't going to change. So we've got to work a way through that. And so from my perspective, the combined authority is in a really key place moving forward, looking at local growth plans and thinking about how we start to play our role across the piece. So you mentioned there are different roles for us. I think there are 4 roles for the combined authority, and I one that we are starting to be more active in. So we're seen as a bit of a cash cow, but actually it's about, we are a funder, but how we use that funding, how we do it in collaboration with others, and how we stimulate areas that aren't active at the moment. So examples for me are our evidence base. One of our projects here that we're leading around the region is about kind of like that monitoring, understanding the state of nature. Key that investors aren't going to be interested unless they understand where their investment will take a certain topic. And so having that evidence base is key. We're a convener, and so this is a great example. The partnership, from my perspective, is a key part of the combined authorities role. The value that this partnership has been established for years is really moving at pace now. And so I don't think there's a massive role for us there apart from being supportive. But actually there are other discussions, and those discussions about how we bring others into the partnerships thinking and activities is really key. We're increasingly becoming an investor, and so looking at our role as a cornerstone investor and how that brings confidence and activity and progress in the investment market is really key. We have seen that through our new Green Growth West impact funds, and we have other funds in the pipeline that will be at a similar scale, hundreds of millions of pounds going into net zero. We need to make sure that in a few years' time we're talking about that nature opportunity. And then the final role I think we have, and it's one that we're developing, and I'm trying to understand the role with in discussions with our Unitary Authority partners, is what role is there in terms of regulation? Is there a gap in our current system around that regulation? I think from an investor's perspective, consistency, reliability, structure is a key part of making sure your investment's going to come back. So if there are gaps, then maybe the combined authority has a role in that space.
Fantastic. Thank you, panel. Right, so we've heard from some real-world investment perspectives what the current challenges and opportunities are. You've heard from Whitni that availability of capital is not a problem. There's no shortage of money. It's how we unlock the investment at scale to deliver the type of ambition we've heard about this morning. So I want to start you thinking about the opportunities. What are the opportunities to overcome the barriers? We all recognise the incoherence. Let's not get into problem admiration this afternoon. How do we demonstrate in practice the opportunity to unlock that private investment and scale investment in nature recovery? So I want you to be thinking about that. I do have two final questions to the panel before I throw it over to you. First and foremost, I think for Liam and Whitni, you both spoke in different ways about the need to unlock that revenue funding. And we heard earlier from Emma, a water company perspective, about the significant investment that flows through Wessex Water's investments in its assets, but it's capital investment. And Wessex Water itself suffers from the need to move its incentives into this OPEX space. So can you give the audience a perspective from your two investor perspectives? What would those preconditions look like? How can we start to demonstrate the opportunity to unlock that revenue funding on the ground? Either of you.
I'll go. So what investors want is they want to know that they're going to get their capital back. And so they want to be investing in a model that has some recurring revenue streams. And so the work that we're doing in my team, so I head up the advisory team, and we're advising several of the LRS projects, is just getting them to think about what are the ecosystem services that they're planning to develop as part of their nature recovery plan. But you've got to drill down quite quickly into the detail. And so this is the bit that just takes a lot of time, I mean, it's down to, which landowners are you working with, which tenant farmers, where are you going to plant hedgerows, where are you going to re-wiggle the river, but it gets granular really, really quickly so that then you can build a model and roll it all back up and understand what revenue can be generated from those interventions. And you can't generate revenue from all of them, which is why we do need the funding from DEFRA, and you do have to have that conversation about where the public investment has to come in. But where you can generate the revenue, then there's the question of who's going to buy it. And so I think that's where, it's great that there are some, forward-thinking corporates already who are willing to come in and do this as a genuine investment. That's great. I think the reality is we are going to need some more stick to go along with the carrot. And so I think in terms of those preconditions, it really is about just creating that market for buyers is just really, really important.
Okay, and Liam, I think I'm going to speak for you, because I know SME is very focused on the demand side at the moment. So rather than, unless you had anything to add, I think we all recognise there's a requirement for policy and regulation here to drive the demand side harder.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, fantastic. And a challenge to you guys on the public sector side, we've heard from you, Joe, about these public funding schemes and the mechanisms available to start to potentially crowd in private investment. So how in practice, if you think about that from the perspective of a land manager or a farmer who needs to get an economic return on the use of their land for a nature-based project like a wetland or a woodland, how in practice can that public funding ideally crowd in that private investment and, I'd say, avoid crowding out the private investment?
That's definitely me, isn't it? Okay. So, because this is all very early days and it's all quite new, I think the public sector has to move into that space and work out what is the art of the possible. And I think that's the space that we're in at the moment. So, going forward on the art of the possible, using that development period, there are many land managers who are completely ready to engage in all of this. There are a vast majority who are not. And so giving them the time and space, whether they're as individuals or in groups working together, to work out what it is they want to do, what is feasible for them, how do they want to work together, how to form their partnership, what is the possibilities, and using the kind of expertise that Triodos are offering some of the landscape recovery projects to understand, okay, this is possible, this is what we can do, right, well, we can build a single legal entity around this and we can build our funding model. We've drawn on some support, and that's what the public funding helps them with, is to understand what they can do, and then they get to that stage. And so, we have one that's ready to go now, ready to sell biodiversity net gain credits and set up their ecotourism.
Okay, Roger, anything to add?
I agree with that completely. I think there is something about the EnTrade and the role and the market that creates. I think there is a role for the public sector to around promotion, around facilitation of the giving examples of how we're working and tackling the supply and the demand, giving that airtime and being a supporter.
Fantastic. Right, we've got just over 15 minutes to hear from yourselves. So I want ideas, I want solutions, and I want questions to these guys about how you're going to overcome the practical difficulties you're facing on the ground to demonstrating how to overcome these these challenges on the ground. Questions, ideas, and best practice people want to highlight, please, to get this finance, to address this finance gap. There's a hand at the back of the room. Takes time to get these going, so other hands welcome at this point in time, so I know where you are.
Hi, I'm Matt Whitney. I'm the Oxfordshire Local Nature Partnership Manager, so we're in the process of creating what you guys have already created, so well done. I just wanted to touch back on the point, Guy, that you spoke for Liam on, that investment requires a return. Return requires a revenue stream, and that requires demand for that revenue to create that revenue stream. At the moment, we've got BNG. At the moment, the amount of BNG units that have been transacted since February is the equivalent of 1 per LPA per year. So that's the size of the BNG market at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot of factors to that. Nutrient neutrality, carbon credits, the price isn't where it needs to be for landowners. So how and what can people do in this room and outside this room to try to stimulate new revenue streams and new markets?
Okay, and Matt, back to you, just before we let go of the microphone, have you got examples from your patch to overcome that problem, or examples you would point to that would help illustrate the challenge?
Yeah, sure. So the landscape recovery projects are a massive part of this. We've got the North East Cotswolds Farmer Cluster who are doing great work on trying to provoke demand from infrastructure providers on natural flood management through soils holding water more, but still it's such a massive shift for infrastructure providers and businesses to think about asset management in a different way like this.
Okay, thank you. It's teetering on problem admiration, so I'm going to hold off for a moment before we give it to the panel, because whilst I'd love to get stuck into a conversation about the demand side drivers, I'm conscious it takes us away from the practical delivery on the ground. So, Matthew.
Hi there, yeah, I'm Matthew Smith from Avon Trees. I'm Natural Capital and Corporate Partnerships Lead. From our experience, again, from landscape recovery, we are managing the landscape recovery projects in the Lower Chew Valley. We're currently in this situation of actually, this has always been landowner-led. So we've actually gone out and spoke to the landowners. The Hattie from NFU was bang on the money when she said each one of these businesses, they are not comparable. We are a landowner within the LR, but we have 6 other landowners. The business models, their ideas, the individuals, totally different. So we've spoke to them about their business. We said, look, we have environmental skills. We see what we need to do with nature recovery, but it needs to fit with your business model. The ideas, the adaptability, the open-mindedness of these business people, because fundamentally farmers are business people, has been astounding. They just don't have necessarily the skills, or they haven't been given the guidance or the support to actually deliver for nature. So we've really taken it from that bottom, going into the field. What does your business need? I've worked in this space for quite a long time, so I think exactly now we're trying to work out, and thanks to Triodos, you've supported a lot of the Lower Chew Forest work alongside DEFRA and WECA as well, so credit where credit's due. And I think what we're now understanding is taking that vision, and we need to understand what the buyers want, and I think that's where we've kind of fallen down a bit within the environment sector. We see it's great, we've got all of these we've got natural capital ecosystem services, but what do they want to buy? And I think that the opportunities and the lens at the moment is quite narrow, but it's going to grow. So I think it's hitting those low-hanging fruit now, get those to land, and then we can start thinking about growing it.
So give us a beacon of hope then, Matthew. You're saying capacity building, essentially. That interest is there, that engagement is there. So it's how do we help those guys take their products, their services to market, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And then Patrick, and then over to the panel.
Hi there, I'm Patrick from Reset. The question it's not really a question, it's a comment more. I'd like to, as the strategy rolls out, that some attention is given to governance. So institutional money, as Whitni was saying, is plentifully available, but it just doesn't invest in anything. It has to be scaled, and it has to have a proper governance structure to it to be investable. Likewise, corporate buyers will buy products not just from individual, if they want to do something useful with it, not from individual farms necessarily, but they need it at scale from farm businesses that do this for a living, nature restoration for a living. So as all of these projects take place, it would be an interesting opportunity to figure out what is the governance so that all of these individual projects can line up to be a nature restoration business proposition as opposed to just projects.
Any bits of best practice you want to point to, Patrick, that give us some hope and direction?
Say again, sorry?
Any bits of best practice you can point to based on your own experience of how that governance might emerge?
Well, we see it with the RSPB and with the Eden Project and other companies that we deal with. They've gone beyond an individual setup to an enterprise of something. And so buyers and investors take confidence from the fact that there is a leadership team with processes and supervisionary processes and tools and so forth that are repeatable. And that gives confidence of permanence. So if you buy something, you obviously want to make a claim of something that's permanent. If that's from an individual, if somebody buys something from me, whatever. But if they buy it from a business, that's a lot more credible.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, I'm going to come back for another round before we can conclude, but over to the panel in no particular order. So just jump in. So we've heard Matt on the demands, how are we going to increase those demand side drivers? Matthew about taking the supply side to market, and Patrick on governance. Liam.
So thanks. Just on Matt, I totally agree with you. We need more compliance markets, and to do that, we need a better framework of regulation incentive that will give confidence and clarity to all. That's happening, but it's happening slowly. We've got Woodland Carbon Code being consulted as part of the emissions trading scheme. Peatland has been excluded from that, which is a missed opportunity. So if you want to do something practical, lobby on that, because that is another source of revenue. And there's wider stuff that's happening in nature markets framework, that's governance, data standards, disclosure. All that needs to happen and quickly, and it all sits together. And a practical point, Matthew, I haven't got a specific answer to your question, but we recognise that a lot of these models require that detailed kind of bottom-up kind of working out, and that takes time and energy. We're working with two organisations who you may be familiar with. One is the Green Finance Institute. They have the GFI Hive, which is a really good practical source of project case studies, and also the Ecosystem Knowledge Network, who are pulling together learning. So for those colleagues who haven't heard of those two organisations, do look them out.
Thanks, Liam. Any other?
I was just going to Patrick's point around the kind of the governance. I think we've got great examples in the region about kind of finance governance kind of models around CityLeap being a good example, and you heard Stephen talk about that earlier in terms of his passion around that, and using that and the replicability of that is really evident. Some of the other work we're doing on net zero, again, you know, they are replicable models that they are different to the CityLeap model, but you know, Justin in the room, having the expertise, Justin from the Combined Authority, having that expertise around investment banking in the public sector, in the Combined Authority, enables us to think, hopefully, in a way that's attractive to investors, and we can you know, build from what we know already in the region, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Roger.
Just to add on the governance, so from the landscape recovery projects, the governance is through this single legal entity. And on the one side, it provides clear assurance for delivery of the project for both the public and private funding. The challenge is people getting used to that model. So the legal and financial reporting requirements are a big step up. It's next level. And that is hard for a lot of our partners who are used to working with just grant funded, you know, perhaps reporting to Life Nature or something. So you know, it's taking time to build that understanding and capacity and engagement, but the governance structure is there and it's tested.
Okay. Whitni, did you want to add anything? No? Okay, fantastic. Right, well, it's back out to you. I saw one hand at the back there, so can I bring you back in just now? And this gentleman here, second.
Hi, yeah, thanks. My name's Rachel. I'm the project manager of the Landscape Recovery Project in Maloa Chew, working with Matthew at the front. I guess my question was around how to build those relationships with corporates or investors, given that there just is uncertainty, and in the absence of maybe being able to give certainty, is it about relationship building trust in these organisations delivering the projects? So if you had anything else to say on that. And then from a landscape recovery perspective, how to start building out those conversations, I guess, at the earliest possible point in the development phase. I think what you were talking about, Whitni, was that high net worth individuals are maybe the best route to go down in terms of attracting financing in uncertain landscapes. So I wondered if Joe had anything to comment on in that way from a landscape recovery perspective.
Okay, thank you. So,
and also, can I add one more thing?
Please
Sorry,
do, yeah.
Just that the comments on being led by the market. Obviously, landscape recovery, a key part of it is being landowner-led and led by what needs to happen on the land.
Yep.
So how can conversations be started at an early stage such that buyers want to invest in what needs to be done on the land from what we hear from the landowners and farmers themselves? That was my second part of that question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then the gentleman here, please.
Hi, Dominic Hogg, one of the old lags from the old previous incarnations of WENP, and it's great to see this event. But my question is really about the creation of those markets and what we could do actually regionally. We've talked a lot here about us being the first, and what I'm fascinated by is whether the Combined Authority could use what used to get called freedoms and flexibilities, but which I hope will be included, I was told earlier, in the devolution bill, essentially powers that it might not currently have to implement policies regionally. And I think there's a really interesting opportunity for the Combined Authority to take a leadership role here in creating those markets for compliance and setting an example for all of those other not first in the country plans to follow. Because if so, I'm just wondering, Roger, whether that's something in the Combined Authorities view at the moment, and what's the scope for doing it?
Okay, thank you. I've just had a post-pandemic moment because I've met Dom a few times online. It's the first time I've met you in flesh, so forgive me. One of the leading lights for what's happening here today, and the Natural Capital Trust kind of is a beacon of ongoing hope, I think, in terms of your vision for that. And then one last, and I'm running out of time, so can you keep your questions super short?
I'll keep it brief.
I'm
Russell Ashfield from Traill. We've been running the Landscape Enterprise Networks, or LENS programme, for the last 5 or 6 years, bringing lots of funding and buyers from global corporate partners in to pay for actual outcomes on the ground. Interesting, Liam and Whitni, really important point that you were making there, that this isn't all about investment for returns on capital. There is a lot of the global corporates we're working with are looking at verifiable outputs for their supply chain. We're working with philanthropic donations as well. So I think it's not all about people looking at 8% returns on pension funds, and understanding that there are different ways into global corporates.
Yeah, good one. Harry, really quick, and then we are going to go around the panel and wrap up. Quick.
Putting the miles in today. Hi, Harry Long. I'm from a local farmer cluster. We've been talking about the supply and demand side. Hattie touched on it earlier, that farmers are under huge amounts of pressure from running their businesses, pressures on providing food, and. There is a lot that goes into becoming investment ready. How do we make it easier for people to pick up the gauntlet and run with it? Reduce, getting funding for surveys, legal agreements, all the rest of it. How do you make it easier to be investment ready?
Got it. That's brilliant. That's a build on Matthew's questions. How do you standardise the building of a pipeline of projects? The role of patient capital. How do we get benefits across to business and engage with business? And Dom's point about, do we reinvent regions? 1 point from each of the panellists, and then we're out of time, I'm afraid, folks. So I can see you nodding.
I'll pick up on the point that Rachel was saying around the buyers. I think we just need, within these LRS projects, I just think there needs to be there's a requirement to build a funding model, but I think just spelling it out even more clearly, that you should be engaging at the outset with figuring out who the buyers are, and do the homework about what's going to work for them. Because as the gentleman from Traill was saying, some of them it's about their supply chain, some of them it's about their CSR budget, and so it is just about just knowing who your buyer is. And unfortunately, until we get more compliance markets, it is going to be about pitching something to people in your region, in your project, that care about the quality of the water or whatever it is, and pitching it in a tailored way. And that just takes time. And so just to pick up on the investment readiness point, I mean, the work that the GFI Hive is doing with their investment readiness toolkit, the case studies from EKN, that is all, an effort to try to make it clear or clarify what these conditions need to be in order to kind of move along the journey. And what's really hard is that the work is probably quite similar on a number of these projects. Joe and I were talking about this earlier, but you've still got to go through the steps with your own, your farmers, your landowners, your local context. And so I think we could do more to help educate what needs to be done, but then the reality is we need to make sure that projects are funded well enough to give time for that stakeholder management and that buyer engagement.
Thanks, Whitni.
I think it was Rachel at the back, your comment around things being designed around the needs of the market versus landowners. Things need to be market relevant, but fundamentally we need to make sure all of these projects and revenues and investments need to be designed around nature, people and community. It's got to be that way round and tailored, and sometimes I think we lose track of that.
Roger? So to Dominic's point around devolution and our role in market regulation or facilitation, I think we heard from Stephen Peacock this morning that absolutely there is something in his mindset at the moment around what that role is. And so I think the B&G regulatory role that we're exploring at the moment, I think that's one example, but one that perhaps is constrained, and there might be another more expansive one where we step into that space and create the environment for that. But I think it needs to be identified as a need, both from an investor and supply side, so that we are operating in a space that's needed.
Thanks, Roger. Last point from you, penultimate point from you, Joe.
Point, well, confidence, I think that's it. Yeah. So nobody in here has done all of this before. We have to work together. We have to build our confidence together and understand how this is going to work together.
Brilliant. Okay, well said. And I think just your insights and questions spoke for themselves, and it was great that we started to get into some practical advice. I hope that has been helpful for all of you in this room. So can I just, before we conclude, take a show of hands again to see if we've done our job as a panel. Who in this room, raise your hand if at the end of this session you all are better educated or inspired to go away and move from strategy to delivery for nature. That's brilliant. Okay, as I say, your questions spoke for themselves. So thank you for your insight and questions, and a particular thanks to each member of the panel for your insight and perspective. Thank you.
Just to say, we're running about 7 minutes behind.
Okay, I'm going to kick off our final panel for the afternoon. So thank you to everyone who has stayed with us with the energy of today. I've certainly been inspired by all the conversations I've heard today and the programmes in the room. I'm really delighted that we have the opportunity to bring our elected officials here from South Gloucestershire, from Bristol, from North Somerset and Bath and North East Somerset, here today, really to share their views and what they're doing in respect to alignment with policy. And I'm going to give them each about 4 to 5 minutes to share some of the exciting ways that they're bringing this to life and making this real already in the region. So I'm going to start, if I may, with Louise, to share some of the current schemes that you've got on the ground that are delivering for nature and for people.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much, and well done everybody lasting till the last session. So we've had quite a lot today. We've had technical staff, we've had science staff, we've had finance stuff, we've had partnership stuff. Well, I'm going to talk to you about passion, because that's the angle I come in from. I've been involved in community politics, nature, climate, all that stuff. Changed its name over the years a few times for about 35, 40 years now, since I was a student involved with the Acid Rain Coalition, for those of you who are as old as me. So to me, what I bring as Cabinet Member in South Gloucestershire, and I am the first person who has the designated role of Cabinet Member for the Climate and Nature Emergency. It was done before, but only as like a little bit of what somebody else did. So me coming to post as the first Cabinet Member, what I'm bringing with me is my passion about partnership and the importance of working with communities. So I'm just going to talk to you about a couple of things that we are doing to show that. The first is the South Gloucestershire, well, originally they were LNAPs, the Local Nature Action Plans. Now they've become, we haven't quite worked out how to say it yet, but the LCNAPs, the Local Climate and Nature Action Plans. And here we have particularly worked with our town and parish councils. We've got about 50 town and parish councils altogether, but a lot of them are really small, literally sort of, 4, 5, 6 people in some cases. But of the ones that are a bit bigger, sort of, 9 or 10 councillors or more, we've now got over half of those signed up for our local climate and nature action plans. And these are about real people. Again, they're not about the clever people in the science, though some of them probably are clever, but not about clever people, the scientists and all the rest of it. These are about real people and real local communities. And the town and parish councils will then work alongside, while they're developing these action plans, a whole host of other community groups within their parishes or their towns. So, for example, we've got a few examples of groups we've got. The Friends of Page Park in Staple Hill is one. The climate action groups that we've got in some particular places, Marshfield is one. Then there's the residents groups that are involved in the climate and nature action plans. Emerson's Green's another one. Then we've got the faith groups. So, for instance, St Lawrence and St Paul at Chippensodbury-in-Yate, which is my own church, all involved in working with their town and parish councils to bring together something that's meaningful, involves local people, is about local communities and what's going on in their immediate local area. And I'm really pleased that we've done such great progress on this through our fabulous group of officers, I should say, because they're all here, they won't talk to me otherwise, but it's true anyway. And what we have done, starting small, and now are at that point where it is a real key part of our delivery strategy. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was joined up working, which is kind of why we're all here today. We all tend to work on our own silos with our own interests, but this only works if we do it across the board, involving everybody. So one thing we've adopted in South Gloucestershire to get positive action on nature and make sure that it's involved across all our work and decision making, not just, again, hiving it off to Matt and Rowena in climate and nature, we can then forget about the rest of it, all of us. We've started using the South Glos Council Climate and Nature Decision Wheel. Now, some of you might have seen one that they use in Cornwall that we kind of pinched and adapted a bit. And now we are saying that every decision that's made, everyone has to consider it within the framework of the Climate and Nature Decision-Making Wheel. And when reports come to Cabinet, it has to say, along with the equality statement and all the rest of it, it has to say how the report has taken account of the decision wheel. And if it comes to Cabinet and they've not really paid much notice to it or ignored it at all, then basically I want to know why. And if I want to know why, that's not necessarily a good thing. So our whole ethos at South Glos Council, and again my personal ethos, which I think permeates on through, is, we heard it earlier today, the think globally, act locally, which I was quite interested when I actually looked it up, because of course a lot of us know probably from the local Agenda 21, the Earth Summit in 1992, but it was actually coined in the early 20th century by a Scottish urban planner by the name of Patrick Geddes. So this isn't new. This has been around for a long time, but we are now at the point where time is running out. And basically, unless we get our collective act together, it will run out. So that's how we're trying to tackle it at South Glos, doing our own bit, which is what we can all do, around community politics, partnership, putting in a bit of passion, or a lot of passion, and working with communities and real people to achieve what we want to achieve.
Thank you, Louise. Yes. And I think, that's really powerful. The passion, the partnership, the purpose, the role of that decision wheel in really driving this to embed it in your regions, really strong.
Yeah, no sloping shoulders.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Louise, would you like to... Sarah, would you like to build on that? Sorry.
Yes, of course. So, can you hear me? Yes. So, Bath and North East Somerset declared a climate emergency first in 2019 and then an ecological emergency in the middle of lockdown in 2020, and we've set objectives to be nature positive by 2030, and we've identified 3 key areas. The first one being expanding the area managed positively for nature. The second one is to increase the number of species locally, and the third one is to increase people's access to nature. So I think the way we've approached these has been quite similar to what people from our other local councils have said. Our main approach has been to try to embed both climate and nature into decision making for all council decisions, and in just the same way as South Gloucestershire, we've adopted a donut economics inspired decision wheel. And one of the specific examples is into planning policy. So we were one of the pioneers on biodiversity net gain, embedding 10% biodiversity net gain a year before the rest of the country. And that's been very exciting because it's given us a source of income, and amongst other routes, we are using it to support local community groups, such as at Chalcombe Meadows on the east side of Bath. And we've got more ideas for planning policy going forward. So we're looking to incorporate new policies around sustainable urban drainage systems and a requirement for more and better green infrastructure, as well as local targets for tree canopy cover going forward when we revamp our local plan. And another area in which we have, we're trying to embed ecological emergency and ecological thinking is through our donut economics-inspired economic policy. But actually going forward, I think that in both of these areas, we can really benefit from a further joint working, I think, with the West of England Combined Authority. So they are stepping into this space, and they've got that benefit of scale, and it's been really positive to hear from Roger and Stephen and Dan today. So I think we'll be. I mean, I think one of the things we could do going forward would be to use some of Stuart's great work on the local nature recovery mapping as the basis for our regional local growth plan and spatial development plan if WECA in future chooses to step back into that space. So to get to a place where we're using what we really know and understand about all the areas around our region that are most sensitive for nature, to build our thinking about where we put our future economic development and housing development in a way that is sensitive to that and takes account of that, to really embed that across all of placemaking policy. Yes, and I think another area actually where we could perhaps develop as well going forward would be around more space, again, to step into adaptation space and to begin to think in a deeper way about a regional role for mapping and coordinating natural flood and natural flow management. Anyway, so there's lots of other exciting things going on. So we've been doing, in the same way as someone else I think as well, around working with public health and getting money for our Active Way project, which is about getting people out and about more into nature in the Summer Valley, and we're now in a position to widen that out around the rest of the district. So it's probably enough from me for now.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's really interesting in hearing and listening to Sarah's commentary also that you can see that we're not just talking about nature markets, in terms of talking about biodiversity net gain, but also we're talking about the opportunities to deliver against ESGs, but also the UN SDG goals are within that framework really strongly within the planetary boundaries. And I think that's a really interesting opportunity for us to really look at investable propositions and funding from the private sector quite broadly. So Martin, I know you've got similar themes, but we're all delivering and applying them in different ways, and it'd be great to hear what you're doing as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, and great to see everyone here and still here, and it's really important to assemble such a wide range of partners. So congratulations for that, and for the document, which is a really important foundation for what we do. So I've got the Sustainable Development Goals badge on my lapel because Bristol adopted those, and I chair the Environment and Sustainability Committee of Bristol City Council. So that's a role which takes responsibility for climate and nature and many other related issues at a council level. And as that chair of that committee, I also co-chair the Bristol One City Environment Board, which takes a strategic partnership approach. And to complement that level of partnership working, which is essential, we also have the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership, who are also represented here today, I'm delighted to say, who do a lot more practical work with partners in and around the city, in the public, in the private, and in the voluntary sector. And it's that cross-sector, collaborative partnership working that I'll just be repeating what's already been said. But it's really important to remember we have to work at all these different scales, collaborate in the region with our strategic partners, with our local community partners. And it's great to see examples of real work by local community partners on show here, such as the Really Wild Lockleys project, which is an example of a local climate action group, a community climate action group, saying we also want to work on nature because the climate and nature emergencies both matter. So scale is one thing. Nature and health is another, so I'm really glad to see that we've got displays and people talking about social prescribing, nature as the solution to health issues, and we have to do that in a way that tackles the inequalities in health and the inequalities in nature as well. So that means targeting sort of what we do and who we work with, or how we work with them. And I was going to add that the previous session is really important because I always think if you're reviewing a policy or writing a strategy, you actually have to think, where's the money coming from? And how can we make more money, and what kinds of money we can get? Because that might affect what's realistic in a strategy or in terms of actually delivering a policy. So we do have to tackle climate impacts, and we need to be resilient to climate. So tackling flooding and tackling overheating both are really good opportunities to include nature-based solutions, both in terms of the tree canopy, the use of biodiversity areas, and sustainable urban drainage, which is really expensive to retrofit, but through our local plan we can certainly make part of new developments. But retrofitting sustainable urban drainage must be one of the solutions to the flooding and the pollution that's affecting our watercourses, of course. So one of the tensions we have is we want sustainable development, but there's immense pressure for what's called growth. And I'd rather talk about sustainable development than growth, because growth has sometimes meant just imposing more housing, imposing more development on a city like Bristol, which is an urban, an almost entirely urban area, where there isn't a lot more room for people or nature. And so we have to think how we can manage that. And if only we had better powers to regulate the kinds of development that are causing that pressure. So biodiversity net gain is all very well, but if you destroy biodiversity to put some development in and then crudely put a pond next to it because you've made a net gain, I'm not entirely happy with that, because if we cut down the tree canopy and damage the nature we already have, that's not ideal. But we're having to deal with those pressures being imposed on us, and it is tricky. But urban greening policy going into our local plan could give us the opportunity to say, how can you enrich the green space in your development area rather than replace it? And finally, a lot of our problems cross boundaries. I'm dealing with issues around river, water pollution. We don't manage the sewage system upriver of Bristol. We don't manage the catchments upriver of Bristol, but we need to help get funding in through things like the Bristol Avon Catchment Fund to manage that land better and to put pressure to regulate the discharge of sewage better, because that's what's flowing through our city. And I'm getting emails saying, sort out the rivers. And I think, yeah, of course. Finally, there's lots of things we can talk about, but I'm also delighted we've got the State of Nature in the West of England report, which demonstrate not only the species-specific groups and the professional groups, but the grassroots monitoring of nature. And there are lots of people in Bristol that want to monitor and see and support nature. And we need to find strategic ways to enable more of that, while it contributes to the state of the wider sort of nature environment, much of which is actually outside the city. But we need to build those bridges and support people who, as I said, really want to do things in their neighbourhoods and in their communities. And I've probably said too much, so thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And I love that point, because nature does not have any boundaries. Clearly, infrastructure, rivers are key points to us looking at that habitat connectivity and looking at how we work together. And I certainly think devolution is a significant enabler to that, and it's a real opportunity for the mayoral authority to help convene in that space and drive that forward. So I think that's really important. Annemieke, over to you for the North Somerset.
Thank you. So I am probably the newest person in the role that I have out of the four of us, because I was only elected just over a year and a half ago as a councillor, let alone go straight onto the executive to have the role that I have, which is climate and waste and sustainability. And it's quite a lot to take on. But I thought today we would talk a little bit about, or I would talk a little bit about some of the practical things that we are doing in North Somerset. So at North Somerset, we're firmly committed to protecting the natural world. And like everyone else here on the panel, our full council declared a climate and nature emergency, and our vision is to be open, fair and green. We actively support the West of England Nature Partnership and have aligned our green infrastructure strategy with their guidance, and it links nature recovery to health and well-being and our local economy. So some of the examples I would like to give is what we do, for instance, on our council-owned land in relation to grass management. We've shifted from mowing 250 hectares of grass to managing 40 as tall grass, and that gets cut only once a year. This has boosted our biodiversity, with species in these areas increasing by 28%, so that's a really good success. In tree planting, we set ourselves quite a tall target that we wanted to achieve, and by now we have planted 40,000 trees, which are transforming our open spaces into thriving wildlife habitats. These efforts have turned previous wildlife deserts into wildlife havens, and I can assure you that along the way we've learned some valuable lessons in responding to residents' needs and overcoming some of the logistical challenges at the same time. So at North Somerset, sustainable growth and nature and health absolutely go hand in hand, and we are really proud of our progress in creating a greener future. So we have focused on balancing the growth agenda very clearly with the nature recovery. And I'd like to mention here 2 possible solutions that show how we as a local authority can translate policies and strategies into action on the ground. The first example is around biodiversity net gain, which is now mandatory, as you all know, but it does present us all with serious challenges. For ecologists, it demands more capacity, new skills, complex metrics, and planners face validation and mapping difficulties, and developers struggle with exemption criteria and early design integration. Although the DEFRA funding has helped, it really isn't enough for ongoing ecological capacity. So we are exploring BNG on our own land, which can bring added benefits for wildlife and local communities. Our land management expertise and partnerships make us really well suited to lead a stable and effective initiative for biodiversity. But achieving BNG is really not simple, as I'm sure you all know anyway. We've conducted baseline surveys, developed land management strategies, and we're now working on registering with Natural England, which requires extensive documentation. And setting up a habitat banking vehicle to facilitate BNG sales is another very time-consuming step. So there are just a lot of hurdles and very high legal costs to overcome, often due to redundant processes across the country. And if we feel quite strongly that if only local authorities were designated as responsible bodies, we could avoid all these challenges. And to truly enhance biodiversity, we really have to streamline those processes and minimise unnecessary bureaucracy. So my second and final example is on a very practical one, which is the North Somerset Nature Parks. So we're blessed in North Somerset with an awful lot of bats, and they are all over the place as well. And so our North Somerset Nature Park is a strategic initiative which is aimed at protecting the internationally protected greater and lesser horseshoe bat population. These bats are covered by a special area of conservation, and under habitat regulation we must mitigate the impacts on development on their habitats, such as increased lighting or loss of foraging land. But mitigation when mitigation can't be provided with the development sites, these developers have to seek alternative lands to fulfil these requirements. Now, this process is hugely time-consuming and very challenging. Now, to address this, North Somerset Council and Natural England have created North Somerset Nature Parks, which is a solution where the council acquires the land, enhances it for bat habitats, and sells bat units to developers. Through a research project with the University of Bath Bat Conservation Research Lab, we've mapped where bats travel, and we've identified the ideal location for habitat protection. This has revealed that bats are travelling much further than previously thought, which then also means that development impacts are felt much more widely than we thought. So consequently, we are now updating our planning guidance to ensure that more areas require bat surveys and mitigation efforts. The North Somerset Nature Park initiative will not only secure vital habitat for bats, but it will also streamline the planning process, making it more efficient and cost-effective for developers. And by providing an easier solution for habitat protection, we can reduce delays and support a thriving bat population in North Somerset. And I'm really happy to say that we have just completed our first land acquisition for this. And if successful, this approach could be rolled out to other regions in the UK with similar bat protections. So finally, before I finish, I'd like to say that I really think North Somerset is setting a valuable example about how policies, if properly supported and implemented, can transform our landscape and make a measurable impact. To truly improve biodiversity, we must pull together policy levers across planning, infrastructure, health, and the economy, and ensure that they support rather than counteract our mission for a nature-rich region. Thank you.
Anna Mika and I were speaking just before about this innovation, these pioneering steps around the land for bats. And what I really like is there's a symbiotic relationship here. If we deliver for bats, it's really interesting that the ambient lighting that bats can actually, do well and thrive in and around is also really positive for people who are vulnerable at night. So as a woman walking, actually having low-level lighting is really positive. So it's a win-win. And that's the whole point, that all the time when we do things and think about designing for nature, we also often inadvertently are designing for ourselves. And we need to keep thinking like that and that multifunctionality. So I'm going to just ask one brief question, because I'm really keen to just open up to the floor, because actually it'd be great to get questions whilst we have you all here in the room. But thinking about everything that you've heard today and noting what your key priorities are, what would be your key asks at this point in time? Anna-Mika, you talked about being a designated responsible body, for example, but do others have similar asks? Or different asks?
I think so. I mentioned, I briefly mentioned, but I think that just more close working at regional level. So where WECA is doing a great job convening on economic policy, I think to get to a place where we're embedding what we know about landscapes for nature at the heart of that, and then perhaps if WECA were to step back into the regional planning strategy role, then once again to bring what we know about nature into that role, because in contrast, I think, to some of the other unitary authorities on the stage with me today, we've had a very significant uplift in housing expectations from the new government. So we've got 100% increase in the housing numbers we have to find in our local plan, which has sent us back to the drawing board. But actually, to be to be planning for that at regional level, taking into account not only what we know the implications of that in terms of sustainable transport will be, but also bringing in what we know about where the important areas for nature are, I think would be a really valuable role for the West of England Combined Authority to step back into.
Thank you, Sarah. Louise,
Yeah, I wanted to mention the Climate and Nature Bill, which I hope quite a few of you are aware of. It's been knocking around as a possible private members bill for a couple of years. But very fortunately, one of the new Lib Dem MPs, Pippa Heylings, came high up in the ballot and has actually adopted it as a private members bill. Now, if this is given government time, it could be a real game changer. A lot of what we want to do, we can't do at the moment because we haven't got the necessary legislation in place. So I think an ask from me to all of you, and I'm not going to go into huge detail about it, you can go and look it up yourselves, is an ask for me is talk to your MP where you are. My MP, Claire Young, Thornbury 8, is one of the signatories to the bill, which I'm very pleased about. But talk to the MPs around your council areas and ask them, are they supporting the Climate and Nature Bill? Has your council written to the campaign, as South Glos Council has, to pledge its support for the bill? Are you in the campaign group? Are you looking at the website? Because we all have lots of things that we'd like to happen and we wish could happen, but for a lot of them, without legislation, it's just not going to happen. So I think the Climate and Nature Bill, as I said, can be a real game changer. We need to get the government to agree to give it parliamentary time so it's got a chance of getting passed into legislation, which does often happen with private members' bills. I understand there's been a few sort of, non-smoke-filled room corridors on this subject, but we need to make sure that it's A, passed, and B, given government time. And that will then give us a framework and a backbone on which we can then really move forward. So please, please, please go home and do that. That's your homework.
Thank you, Louise. A great ask. Martin.
Yes, thank you. And well, just firstly, just to respond, yes, of course, that's really important. And some of us took part in a discussion at the Local Government Association conference on that. And we want to see practical ways to bring obligations, duties and resources into delivering it, and it has been supported by my MP, Carla Denyer, as the Green MP, who also launched the climate emergency movement in Europe, which is great. I was going to say, get involved and stay involved. And obviously you're all already here, so you are involved, but get more people involved at all levels. You need to make it clear to businesses, public bodies, voluntary groups, community organisations, that you expect them to be involved and to do something practical. And expectations are very high in Bristol. That doesn't make life easy always, but we need people to be involved so that there's strategic action, there's corporate action, there's commitments of corporate contributions to practical projects, and that communities can be supported, because people want things going on, and they want to be involved. Lots of our community climate action groups, I hope, will be complemented by community nature groups in the near future, designated with practical support to help people to actually show there are things you can do locally. But we have to join it all up. So there have to be those large-scale, regional, citywide, and neighbourhood opportunities. So just keep everyone involved, because it shows there's the will to do more. And obviously we have to restore nature and to tackle the problems we have.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And I would just add to that, I mean, wouldn't it be great if from today we could go out to all of the CEOs of big business across this region, ask them to use their volunteering day to get out into these sites to experience what we're doing and see the benefit. I introduced Network Rail to the Avon Load, to the North East Cotswold cluster. We went out in the fields and talked about how nature could play a role in their resilience of their infrastructure, and it's brilliant that that's now being bedded in. It was spoken about at the Nature Finance Conference.
Yeah. So a remarkable number of my former colleagues from the Environment Agency are here today, including Roger at WECA. And actually in the policy team there, when I was in the climate team there, and then the business environment team, we said, why are we doing civil service sports days when we're the Environment Agency? And we actually took that to our management, who took it to the directors, and the chief executive said, yes, everyone should have two environment days a year. You can still do sport, but the agency would support environment days. And we made sure we did them. And we went out, we cleared rivers, we helped work with community gardening groups, we cut brambles, and we put up bat boxes, because actually we can all do something through our workplace too.
Brilliant. My namesake, Zoe, I was giggling earlier because we both, Zoe means goddess of life. I thought it was very apt. There's two of us here today. She's given me the 5-minute warning. Annemieke, I want to give you an opportunity to also express your ask, and then I will briefly go to the floor.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be anything earth-shattering. I think it's what I said earlier about more streamlined processes and less bureaucracy. Because I think the more complicated we make these things, the more hoops we have to jump through, the harder it gets. And I was listening earlier with great interest to the discussion with the farming community, which has always been a bugbear of mine, that they need to have a much better way into speaking to the farming community. At the moment, there are just so many hurdles for people to jump through before they can get anything done. So that is a really big one. And the other one is really straightforward. It's lots and lots and lots of money, please.
Fabulous. Right, we'll go to the floor. Has anyone got some questions of this fantastic panel while they're here? Hands up. Or have we answered everything? We've solved it all. We've fixed it. We're going to make it real. Yes. Yes. The lady here.
Hi, I'm Rachel Williams. I work for Natural England, and I wanted to ask, so I think there's been quite a lot of calls for that regional level kind of interaction, integration, that pooling of funding, and yet previously, a number of years ago, we talked about Natural Capital Trust and other things, and actually when push comes to shove, it often comes back to local authorities needing to work across boundaries, and it being felt that actually where the development is happening, that's where the money should be invested. So what's going to change, I guess, to make that a reality?
Annemieke,
I'm probably talking completely out of turn here, because actually we're North Somerset Council and we're not in WECA. So it's a really good question. Thank you, Rachel. I don't know where we will be in a few years from now. That may or may not have changed. But it is also why I'm particularly pleased to be here today, because as North Somerset, we often just miss out on a lot of that stuff because we're not in WECA. And yet we border onto each other. You know, when Martin talks about, you know, housing needs in Bristol, and I'm looking at the South Bristol Link Road, which is just North Somerset, actually. You know, there are so many areas where we work together, we should work together, and yet there is always a barrier at some point which says, but you're not WECA. And it's not because people are unkind, it's just the way the funding has gone. And I am absolutely in favour of partnership working. I think none of this is going to get resolved and sorted if we don't work together across what are currently boundaries, but what perhaps at some point may not be boundaries anymore. You never know.
Thank you. Can I go to Sarah next, please?
Yeah, I had a thought in response. I think probably what we need to do at the combined authority level is to do a little bit more work on what the individual responsibilities of the unitary authorities are and what the responsibilities of the combined authority are. Because at the moment, as Roger, I think, and others said earlier, I guess at earlier stages of its existence, the combined authority was very much thought of as just a channel for money down to the unitary authorities. At the same time, what we have in the unitary authorities is we have a lot of historical knowledge of the local area and of the organisation and and of our local populations. So I think to do a piece of work perhaps in which we sit down and, because of course there are things like flood management that are much better done at a larger landscape scale, and the mapping exercise that today is all about, that wonderful mapping exercise, much better done at large scale. But equally, the implementation on the ground and in partnership with local communities is probably better done at unitary authority level. So I think probably West of England Combined Authority has been doing quite a bit of work on its role and purpose, and perhaps that's a little bit of work that needs still to be done to just map out which are the things that need to be done at high level and which are the ones that are better down closer to communities.
Yeah. I'll come to Louise and then to you, Martin.
Yeah, of course, I'm sure Annemiek knows that North Somerset originally, chose not to come in.
That was
but we hope that will change, and I will not upset Roger by giving the West of England Combined Authority I see as definitely a strength, because we don't, the River Frome doesn't stop. It starts in South Gloucestershire, but it doesn't stop in South Gloucestershire, and rivers being one of the key interests to us, and planning as well. We were supposed to have a strategic plan for the whole of the combined authority area, which we didn't. Hopefully that might come to fruition in the future. But at the moment, we're all working on our own individual plans. And certainly there are tensions. So, for instance, our colleagues in Bristol eye up our green fields in South Gloucestershire. And in South Gloucestershire, we say, go away. We don't want you building on our green fields because we are trying to protect nature. You can build on your disused land, or you can go up. So these conversations, do have to be had. And when it comes to the local plan inquiries, then each local authority does have to take account of its neighbours. So there's going to be some quite interesting conversations when we get that far, I think. And just something else I wanted to pick up on, which I find slightly frustrating, is we are all scrabbling around for the same money. So South Gloss puts in a bid for something, and so does Baines, and so does Bristol, and then we all might get a bit, or a lot, or none, depending on how good, in inverted commas, our bids were judged. So I think working all from the same pot of money, rather than have to try and outdo each other to get our own bit of money, would actually be a better way of working going forwards, with a more strategic overview than just, what can we do to grab a few 100,000 or a few thousand for my patch? What's looking across the area for the benefit of the whole of the area?
Fantastic, great points, Louise. Now, I know we're in minus time, hence why I'm closing any clapping out, because I do want to give Martin the opportunity to also have a voice here before we close.
What they said, and local government should have the duty to cooperate, but all public bodies should have the duty to cooperate. And ideally, in our strategic partnerships, all our public, private and voluntary sector partners will cooperate because collaboration is the route to solving these issues. As we said, it doesn't cross boundaries. Pollution doesn't, traffic doesn't, all those things that cause impacts on nature. So let's make sure we do that.
Well, thank you all so much. It's great to hear the shared alignment, around themes and topics and passion and purpose across our councils across this region. So join me in thanking our panel. Thank you. So we'll segue on.
Thank you, Zoe, and wonderful panel, and keep up the good work. Martin's my local councillor. Sergeant Major Zoe over here, other Zoe, says we have 5 minutes just for a few final reflections. We're going to get some final thoughts from Chairman Ian in a minute, but we've got just a few minutes just for any reflections from you about things that have hit you today. Is there something that has surprised you, inspired you, challenged you, or even infuriated you? We got hands already. So very quick, just give us some headlines. More to talk about, obviously, but what's hit you today?
Where's the culture? Where there's no, is this on?
Is it up? Hang on, hold on.
I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact that the culture team got themselves onto one of the policies in the Bristol's working plan, local plan, excuse me, and it means that culture will be working closely with developers. It's policy now, if we get passed by the Insectorate, of course.
Wonderful. Brilliant next step. This is about bringing more people into the tent. Culture is a huge one, and we welcome you. Thank you.
And you could put the environment in the next time.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. Anybody else? And the front here. Run, Zoe. It was you who said 5 minutes.
Yeah, just very quick. Matthew Smith from Avon Trees. There's a lot going on. There's a big smorgasbord of activity, especially in this region. How are we going to?
How are we going to
try
again?
How are we going to capture all of those lessons and feed it to our councillors, who can feed it up into the multilateral environment agreement, so we can actually at the next COP show what the UK is doing it, and we're actually leading the way and really getting that information to where it needs to be in those international audiences.
Brilliant, nice one. And I'd just like to say, I just want to pay special tribute to you guys, because I did a lot of the prep for this and working up, the website and all the cases and everything. And your project comes up again and again and again as an absolutely brilliant, shining example of things working really well. So hats off, because you're leading. We are going to learn from that. And it's those projects that do that and demonstrate it, knocks the risk out, builds the trust, and gives people the inspiration to lean in. So thank you. Just wanted to say that. So let's hear it for Avon Trees. Anyone else? Me. Oh, at the back. Needy at the back.
Is this working?
Are we on? Yes, go.
So Tim Corner, I'm from the Environmental Record Centre, the Bristol Regional Environmental Record Centre. Best one in the country.
Closer to your mouth, so we can hear you. Sorry.
Oh,
thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bristol Regional Environmental Record Centre, which is the best in the country, but that's not my point. Because you mentioned about what haven't you heard or what infuriates you.
Yeah.
So I've only been here half the day, so you might have mentioned it in the morning. But I suspect most of the people in the room are sort of converted to the idea of nature, and we all love nature. But at the same time, we have to justify why we're doing things for nature and stuff. So the one thing I sort of noted was that there was no talk about children. Mm-hmm. And so to an extent, I mean, I love wildlife. I've been in wildlife all my life in terms of work and stuff. But I'm not important at all. I think it's the children. If you ask children, they just tend to say that they just love wildlife, and all they want is for people not to hurt the wildlife and the environment and the climate. So I just wanted to mention about children, really.
Great. So like culture, this is a really important area to bring in. Brilliant. Thank you. Anyone else? At the back there. Thank you, Mia.
Hi, Amy from Avon Wildlife Trust. I guess, it's kind of feeding on a little bit to what was just mentioned. really exciting to hear community being considered so heavily in nature approach, because if we don't have buy-in and inclusion of the communities that we're trying to do this work in, it's not going to be effectively received. And most importantly, with young people, we need to see a lot more recognition that we need to, make nature a exciting and viable career option, and also just a hobby that isn't for middle-class white older people. And it's really there's a lot that's been said today and a lot of stuff about funding, but it's really hopeful to hear that community engagement projects would be incorporated into that at the same value as the actual creation itself on a landscape scale.
Brilliant. And just building on that, building out from that, training, skills, green jobs, this is part of the economy, this is part of the future, and it's for us to show people that these are real jobs, and for the regulatory authorities and the combined authority to make sure that there's a sustainability there, so we don't have a cliff like we had with those poor people who all put solar panels on our roofs a few years ago, and then the government then pulled the plug on the whole lot and they all went bust, making it very, very difficult to persuade people back in, because they go, well, you'll shaft us again. So that idea of really looking ahead, and we need to feed into that conversation. So it's about communities, but it's also about livelihoods, isn't it? Building livelihoods into it. Thank you for that. Anybody else? One or two left. Oh, here we go. We go to the front here. You're going to have to tell us when to get off, Zoe.
Hello? Is that working?
2 mins.
Is that working?
Go ahead.
So Matthew Lipton at South Gloucestershire Council. Just really excited to hear the talk about the finances at today's event. Like many of the people in this room, you're probably like me in that you've got 1,000,001 different projects that could be delivered tomorrow if the money was available. We know what we need to do. We pretty much know where to do it. We've got the skills and knowledge in this room to do it. We just need to figure out a way to actually break that financial barrier, because that's just holding back so much action. And we could achieve it tomorrow. So much good for nature. We just need to break that financial barrier. So great to hear that being talked about today.
Fantastic. Just gives me an opportunity to feed in something that I spoke to Bevis about, Bevis Watts from Triodos, when we were discussing this before, that he didn't have time to say, and he said, I said, what would you say to the sector? What would you say to the partnership? And he said, imagine in 10 years' time. He said, my vision is, imagine in 10 years' time, you will look back and go, do you remember the time when the vast majority of the work that we were doing was paid for by subscriptions and grants and philanthropy, when actually here we are now in a situation 10 years down the line where those markets have been built, we've gathered the right people around us, and actually the money that is then taken in for by memberships and stuff feels like pocket money. So that's a wonderful vision, and there's a man who's building it. So I think we can, we need to reach forward with that, with the right projects, show that we're ready.
Thank you. Karen Renshaw from Bath North East Somerset Council. Two things. One thing, this has been really great and well done to everyone, but I wonder whether there's a partner or group of partners missing, which are the mass builders, because we don't want them as an enemy, we want them as a partner, and I think we're missing a trick, possibly. We've got lots of new policy coming with this BNG, there's the whole rest of it. If we're going to make great new spaces, accessible green spaces for nature, then we have to have them on board. So maybe we need to think about that.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, we're going to try and squeeze in 2 more. 1 more. No more. No more. Sorry. Over now to Ian for his quite literally, final reflections.
Thanks all. Thanks everybody for your involvement, participation, enthusiasm today. I mentioned earlier that this week is my last week as the chair of the West England Nature Partnership. Many of you will know it's also my last week as Chief Executive of Avon Wildlife Trust, because I finish at the Trust tomorrow. So I've been privileged to be given this opportunity to just give a few reflections on my time at Avon Wildlife Trust and today, and kind of looking at things going forwards. So I've been here for 8 years, and it's been an immense privilege in that time to be involved in the West England Nature Partnership as an absolutely key vehicle for delivering for wildlife across the area. But not just the Nature Partnership. There's the Bristol Natural History Consortium, and Savita is over here from that one. The Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership, as it now is. This is an area where people like to get together and really look at how we can make this place where we live a much better place for people and for wildlife. There's a lot I could talk about. There's so much that we've achieved over that time. I just wanted to talk a little bit actually about Avon Wildlife Trust and the role that Avon Wildlife Trust has got to contribute in this that we've been talking about today. So I know there's a lot of people here from the Trust today. Can I just ask you all to stand up, please, for a minute so everyone can see who you are? Yeah. Thank you. So Avon Wildlife Trust strategic targets, 30% of land in the west of England managed for the benefit of wildlife, 1,000 hectares of new habitats created by nature-based solutions. Those things directly link in to what we're doing today and can only be delivered by working in partnerships like the West of England Nature Partnership and the others that I've mentioned. So partnership working is a core part of how we deliver what we're looking to do. And Shelley, actually, if I can ask Shelley to stand up again. Shelley's our representative on the West of England Nature Partnership, who's leading that work within the Trust and will continue to be involved in the partnership going forward on how we do all of that. And I'll come back to that again in a minute. The other thing I wanted to mention was our third target, which is 1 in 4 people taking action for nature, which picks up some of the points that people were making at the end there about culture and children and youth and all of those other things. It's only by getting everybody taking action for nature that we're going to get the difference that we need to make, whether that's landowners and farmers or builders or any of the other groups that have been mentioned. We need to be getting everyone on board. And as Amy said, that's about that bottom up, getting into communities, working with people, getting everybody on board. So at Avon Wildlife Trust, we've got behind an initiative called Team Wilder, which is about getting people involved and getting people taking action. If we can get the behaviour change research shows if you can get 18 to 25% of people doing anything, you begin to reach a tipping point where it becomes a societal norm. And that's what we're trying to do. And we've deliberately not made Team Wilder an Avon Wildlife Trust brand. It is something that we can all get behind and we can all do. So I'm delighted that a lot of the local authorities are promoting Team Wilder and looking at what we do from that. And I'd encourage everybody to promote Team Wilder as a way that people can get involved and feel part of something big and start to be part of the change in the area. I'd just like to ask Julie to stand up, who's our lead at Avon Wildlife Trust on Team Wilder. I mean, if you don't know about Team Wilder, if you want to talk about Team Wilder, seek out Julie afterwards. We'd love to work with more people on getting people taking action for nature. Avon Wildlife Trust has got really exciting plans in a lot of these areas. We are looking to buy land. We're looking to create credits. We've got big news coming up on that, hopefully in the next few months. We've already sold back credits in North Somerset. So Avon Wildlife Trust, one of our values is innovation, is getting stuck in, trying to do things, getting things done. So we're absolutely part of this movement with all of you fantastic organisations who are doing the same things. And it's been an immense privilege to be involved in that in the last few years. Our other values, so innovation, passion, given the climate and nature emergencies, and inspiration, working through and with others. And actually, you can see that those are values that are shared broadly in this partnership. We're not people who try and just stay in our silos and do our own thing. We're out there working with each other for the benefit of the environment, and that's fantastic to see. So today has been about several things for the Nature Partnership. Partly it's been about celebration first, local nature recovery strategy and the fantastic work that Stuart and the team and everybody have done to bring all that together, to capture all the work that we've done over the years. So, and yes, celebrating all that we've done that's brought us to this point, all the work that's behind it. And then that next look at how do we turn all of that strategy, all of that vision into things that have actually happened on the ground. And some really interesting discussions this afternoon, starting to get into the detail and the difficulties and some of the gritty work that he's doing. And Whitni talked about, actually, you have to really get into the detail, and it's different for each case, and it's what we're trying to do. And that's really one of the key points about today, is taking that vision, taking that big picture. We want to improve the grasslands from the Mendips up the Cotswolds. We want to improve our rivers. We want the North Somerset levels and moors to be thriving and full of wildlife. We want to do all of those things, and we're setting out that vision, and we're just at that point now where we're starting to do that nitty-gritty work. Who are the landowners in those areas that we want to work with? Who's willing to work with us? What are the communities? What do they think? What's the potential for biodiversity net gain credits or carbon credits or whatever it is in these different areas, and doing that work. And Zoe, who's not here anymore, mentioned this morning the work that Atkins have been doing with us on looking particularly at that Mendip Cotswold Scarp and doing the business case and starting to look at what are the nitty-gritty things we need to do on the ground. And that's the stage we're at now. We know that's the next stage. We know that's the work that needs doing. And part of the message we're trying to give here is we're open for business, and we're wanting to work with people who are looking for opportunities to get involved in those kind of projects, whether that's philanthropists, whether that's public funding, whether that's private funding, bringing those people together to make the change happen on the ground. And one of the things which really stands out today is just how much knowledge and expertise there is in this room and in the region. You know, we've got, and the people who aren't here today who are real experts on this stuff, who work in the region and work on the working groups of the West of England Nature Partnership. So we've got all of that expertise here. We've got all of the expertise of Triodos and Esme Fairbairn and all their national learning to work on, and we're looking to really gear up and work in partnership with everybody to get that done on the ground. So that's the reality, that's the difficult bit we're at now, and we know we need to work through that, but we also want to keep that vision, that high level. Can we do the kind of approach of the city leap of getting those millions and billions in to really do it at scale? So we are going to have to start with the nitty-gritty, the proof of concept, the showing that we can do it, and looking at building up the businesses, the governance, the models that we've heard about to make it happen, but all with that end vision in mind, the video that we saw this morning about the change we want to make in the West of England. So it's my final day tomorrow before I sign on for all this, so I'll be moving on, but I'll still be active in all of this area. The organisation I'm moving to, the Earth Trust in Oxfordshire, is doing very similar things. It was the first organisation working with the Environment Bank to do biodiversity net gain in this country. It's done floodplain realignment and wetland creation alongside the Thames in Oxfordshire, and Earth Trust is looking to demonstrate, engage and influence on how you create places where people and wildlife can thrive. So I'll still be active in this area, hopefully making it back to things like this in the future, and I'll be fascinated to see what happens here and how much of this we can make a reality. Because I think, going back to where I started, Avon Wildlife Trust is a fantastic organisation with fantastic people and fantastic plans. I think all of the organisations in this room, the West of England Nature Partnership, fantastic partnership, fantastic plans, fantastic ambition, and the people that are needed to make it happen. So I just want to say thank you again for all your enthusiasm and all your involvement, and you know, I'm just can't wait to see what you manage to make happen in this area. So the final things for me to do are once again to thank our sponsors today, AtkinsRealis, EnTrade, Triodos, and there's been enormous support from the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority in getting this event happening today. And this isn't on my script, but I also need to thank Tim for the fantastic work he's done in facilitating and inspiring and challenging us all today and bring all that coming through. And to Zoe and the team for organising all this and all of the fantastic work they do to keep the partnership running and bring us all together. So thank you very much to everybody.
Move over. We're not going to let you get away that quickly. Hold these, please. Hi, everyone. I'm Savita. I'm director of the Natural History Consortium, and I have the honour of saying thank you to Ian on behalf of the board, all of the member organisations, and everyone who's had a part to play in WENP over many years. So I had the chance to meet Ian by chance back in 2011, 2012, when he had a national role at DEFRA, but was really interested and passionate about how he might move into a regional role in the West of England and make a difference for nature here. He went on to do a senior role at Sustrans, And anyone who was involved with 2015 will remember pictures of Ian splattered on billboards across the city with his bicycle, encouraging us all to cycle. We can probably Google that over drinks. That'd be quite good. As you've heard, tomorrow Ian steps down not just from Avon Wildlife Trust, but from my board, the One City Environment Board, the Green Capital Partnership. His commitment to partnership working in the region has really driven WENP and this move from strategy to delivery. Ian is a great leader. I've seen him step back and let other people take the limelight, but also to step forward and ask some really challenging questions when we needed to hear it. I think I speak for a lot of people in the room saying Ian's been a great support and a great friend. And if you don't know him that well, it's not too late. There's drinks after this, and there's still a chance to join and to get to know you a bit better. So Oxfordshire's win is our loss, but we're so pleased you're moving into a role with national impact. Don't be a stranger. And on behalf of the board and everyone here, thank you so much, Ian.
Okay, it's time to say goodbye, but can I say it's time to say au revoir? We have come together, and can I now urge you to stay together? First of all, there was feedback beginning to pile in just at the end there before Sergeant Major Davies over there cut us off in our prime. Remember the feedback form, okay? We want to hear your ideas. We just keep feeding ideas in. This is an ideas-based game, okay? We want the best ideas, we want the crazy ideas, we want the stretch ambitions, okay? So please feed back. How was this? How are we? Where do we go next? Please keep contributing. And I'm very pleased to say that there are 4 opportunities for us to come together again and soon. So on Wednesday, the 20th of November, double bill actually, we have the screening of the Sea, Land, City film in Bristol. That's going to be a really good event. And on the same day, a meeting of the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership. So 2 opportunities there. And then Tuesday to Thursday, that's the 26th, 27th and 28th of November, is Savita's wonderful Bristol Natural History Consortium Communicate Conference. If you haven't been, it's absolutely amazing. All the face-to-face tickets are sold out, but you can still go online. And I'm delighted to say that it makes me feel quite old because I was one of the founding members. It's 20 years old this year. That's absolutely amazing. It is one of the most amazing, practical, inspiring gatherings of people, and all of the stuff that goes up and is recorded, and it goes into a bank of stuff that you can then see online. It is the most amazing group of people and an incredible resource. So hats off to Savita and the team for that, and get stuck in. The 4th one starts now in the Thatcher's Bar downstairs where drinks are served. I think you have to pay for them. So please carry on the conversations. Let's meet again soon. Stay together. Think of those stretch ambitions. Bring in more and more people into our big tent. We're first, but we're next. Thank you very much.